Good evening. It's 6 o'clock. We'll start the Common Council meeting. It is Tuesday, February 13th. Call to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item C, identify possible conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest this evening? Seeing none, move on to item D. Public comment period, correspondence. At this time, I will recognize those members of the public that have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by me, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Mr. Bill Panker.
Good evening, William Penker, 600 Sycamore Avenue. I'm speaking from the perspective of a longtime council watcher, as well as one who is concerned about economic development. My comments are related to Mr. Anderson's presentation at your meeting on January 30, as well as your discussion and questions. And I have 3 points of concern. Number one, I hope at a future meeting, you and interested taxpayers get to see the grant application, the letters of support, and the qualitative and quantitative analyses of the economic impact on the city. In addition, we should see the analysis of how the community center project would help or hinder the goals of the comprehensive plan, the downtown master plan, and the 2nd Street corridor project, which happens to be anchored by 2 community centers. Number 2, considering the many years of vacancies in the Mill Creek Business Park, does the city, by default, no longer have a business park? Given the apparent lack of interest of business and industry, is the business park still a viable venture? On the other hand, if the city wants to keep the business park viable, isn't it time for a vigorous, aggressive multimedia promotion and recruitment program? And isn't it time to attract some of the target industries listed in sections 2 and 7 of the comprehensive plan? And number 3, if you decide to waive any of the covenants so the community center project could go forward, might it be a positive point to attract tenants to the business park? Or does your market research show issues such as location, a business park that's in the 21st century, not the 20th, good schools, affordable housing, and a vibrant downtown are more important to corporate decision makers? And in closing, 2 questions. Where does a barely filled business park, conceived in the 20th century and barely mentioned in the comprehensive plan, fit into Marshfield's 21st century development picture? And how does a facility such as the one described at your last meeting fit into the same picture? Thank you.
Thank you. Any others to come before this meeting? Any other correspondence? 3rd time, any other correspondence? Thank you. Moving on to item E, approval of minutes, January 23rd, 2024, regular meeting, and January 30th, 2024, special meeting. We have a motion by Alderman Fire, a second by Alderman Stauber. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Reigel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item F, staff updates.
We have the 2 items only that are listed on the agenda tonight. The first is an election-related programming announcement by Tom Lokes, our Communications Director.
All right, thank you. Just want to provide a short update on our election programming. We are full speed ahead. That means David and myself on our Marshfield Broadcasting Division in the Communications Department. If you haven't checked out our school board interviews with the 7 different candidates, they are streaming and available on our Marshfield Now channel, Facebook, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, Spectrum, cable channel 990, the marshfieldbroadcasting.com, and the city website, as well as you can get to that by the Connect mobile app we have. Future, we're working on the Wood County Board candidate interviews for District 1 and 5. I just made some calls today and scheduling those over the next 2 weeks. And we'll be following up with city council candidates here in the districts, the odd districts, and the mayor position. We may do the school board again after the primary. We'll see if there's enough time. Good news is we currently have over 10,000 views so far just on the programs we did on the school board candidates, and that's not including the forum that we did live a couple weeks ago. So we're getting great turnout and engagement on those programs. We'll also be doing a program with the county clerk, Trent Miner, as well as Jessica. She might be a surprise to her, but we'll be doing that, about changes in election rules, possibly sometime early March. Right now, that's to be determined, and I already had a call out with Trent, so we'll see where that is. So that's our update. We're very busy, probably the most election programming we've done since I've been here for 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Tom, and great job on your coverage of the elections so far and looking ahead. Second and final item under staff updates is a declaration of official intent as allowed per resolution number 2023-32 presented by our finance director, Jennifer Selensky.
Good evening. Now that we are into our new fiscal year and our new budget cycle, we in the finance department will be looking ahead to our borrowing for our capital projects that were approved in the last budget cycle. One of the things that we have to do in order to make our bonds qualify for tax exemption is if we intend to spend money ahead of the borrowing, we have to declare an official intent that we intend to pay back those expenditures incurred with that borrowing. So that is what resolution 2023-32 authorizes. And then I've included a copy of the projects that were approved in the 2024 budget on the declaration of official intent that I signed in January.
Thank you. That's all we have tonight under staff updates.
Item G, mayor's comments. I just have one comment this evening. A friendly reminder, primary election voting to narrow down the field for school board race. You can vote for up to 3 candidates, but you can vote for 1, 2, or up to 3, but only 3, and there are 7 candidates to pick from. In-person voting yet this week at City Hall, 207 West 6th Street is Wednesday the 14th and Thursday the 15th from 7:30 to 4:30, and Friday the 16th from 7:30 to noon. There'll be no voting on Monday, and if you haven't done that by then, you can go right to your voting place and cast your ballot. Hope to see you all, and thank you. Council comments. Alderman Tompkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to say that Mr. Stauberg and I are exploring and working on a little improved onboarding process for city council members. Hopefully this will be a process that will then be expanded to other people when they are elected or appointed to commissions and things like that. We're planning, first of all, that the orientation booklet that we all receive on council, it's got great information. It's it was fantastic for helping me fall asleep when I first got on council. Now it actually is more pertinent, but when I first got this, I was like, what in the world? So that will be put online so that anyone can see it and they can know what are the ethics involved in being a council member, what are some of the rules for Robert's rules, things like that. Anyone can get that. And then second, the organizational meeting that is scheduled for the third week of April, we're planning to have a training session afterwards. And so I don't know if Hap knows about that, but we are going to give Hap time to explain ethics, conflicts of interests, what do you do with gifts, can you accept gifts, all those sort of ethical things. Jessica would explain how do you run a meeting, what are some of the pertinent Robert's rules. Steve would talk about our 2 revenue sources, just to sort of give a broad, get people up to speed, and then we would hope to expand that. So just giving everyone a heads up that we're working on that, and we're just trying to improve the process so that when people do come on board, they don't feel like they're just barely keeping their heads above the water. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Tompkins. Any other comments? Seeing none, City Administrator's update.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 4 quick items tonight. The first is just a reminder that Carrie Edmondson, our new Assistant City Administrator / Community Development Director, will be joining us on the 26th of February. So 2 weeks from tonight, I believe she'll be at this meeting, get a chance to meet her in person, and I ask you all to welcome her and engage with her. I think she's going to be a great addition to our staff. I've sent out notes to some of you, but coming down to the end when I need to know for sure how many people want to go to the Housing Summit in Wisconsin Rapids on Thursday, March 7th. A couple of you have already signed up. Others from EDB and Plan Commission, as well as staff, are going. So a great opportunity to be part of an event where the county as a whole has been looking at housing needs in our area. That's on Thursday, March 7th. But if you want to go, I need to hear from you like really soon, within the next 24 hours or so, because we're wrapping it up to get our registration off to the county. We have talked about at previous meetings here, was brought up about maybe a special budget meeting looking ahead to the 2025 budget in advance, kind of get a sense of what's going on with revenue and expenses, and talked in recent weeks about some of the things with the pilot and possible loss of some revenue from the clinic settlement or whatever comes up. So looking at doing it before a regular council meeting in March, either the 12th or the 26th. So I'd be looking for an email, trying to float who might be available, but it should be a night when you are available, because thinking of having it at 5 o'clock on the night of a regular council meeting. And that'll be a good jumpstart, a chance for staff to engage with council in terms of some of the challenges we have, and start planning for how we're going to deal with some of the issues that will be coming up in just a few months as we head into summer and early fall. And then finally, I want to, like I said at the last meeting, catch up on some of the council requests that have been made under items for future agendas. You have 2 on your agenda tonight, and the next meeting on the 27th, we're planning 2 others. One is a follow-up on Councilmember Spiro's request for looking at some of the issues with overtime and EMS and how some of that works. A lot of good questions were raised by her at a previous meeting. And then also the procurement policy that both Councilmember Werman and Councilmember Rigel have brought up before, looking at our procurement policy, the whole issues of bids versus quotes, and how we do business. So look for those to both be on the 27th agenda. And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Steve. Reports from commissions, boards, and committees. I'm sorry, Alderman Wagner.
I just wanted to add that instead of going on the city's time, I'm going to the Housing Consortium meeting on the county's time. So at least we have somebody down there. I encourage you to go, because they're putting together a pretty good showing down there.
Excellent. Thank you. Again, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Seeing none, move on to item K, consent agenda. Motion by Alderman Tompkins, second by Alderman Giles. Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you. I'd like to pull 2 of the items out. The item K.14.3, the vacation policy 3.510, and also item K.12.3 on the communications department relocation. Just for discussion, please.
We have a motion to accept the rest of the minutes and reports. Motion by Alderman Tompkins, second by Alderman Giles. And now moving on to your request, Mike.
We need to vote first.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Can we please vote? Sorry.
Mr. Weigel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Alderman Weigel?
Ms. O'Reilly.
I mean,
O'Reilly.
sorry.
Ms. O'Reilly, I'm sorry.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank
I'm
you.
looking right at you, sorry.
I think I'll touch on these two items separately. First, we'll talk about the finance, budget, and personnel meeting vacation policy that went through. I was contacted by a longtime city staff that was extremely concerned about the portion of how vacation was going to be affected at a retirement time. And I'm wondering if we could get a full explanation on that, because I was a little lost watching that meeting and didn't really follow along what it was. If someone could maybe elaborate on that, please.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, so the information I passed out is basically just an example of the current policy versus the proposed policy. And what it does is it looks at an employee with over 20 years of service, as an example, who has 5 weeks of vacation. Their anniversary date is on March 2nd of this year. Their wages are approximately $25 an hour. They are handing in their notice on March 4th. They're giving 2 weeks notice, which is required. So their last day of work scheduled based on that is going to be March 15th. And they haven't used any vacation, no personal holidays, and they have approximately 46 hours of compensation time or comp time for the current anniversary year. So basically, under the current policy, if their final day of work is March 15th, they can schedule out after March 15th, 5 weeks of vacation, which would extend their time out to April 19th. Then with 2 personal holiday days and their comp days, that's another 7.5 days. So that would put their final date at May 1st. So that would mean that employee health, dental, vision coverage, which they have, would extend through the end of May. So this is, again, just an example. So what that means is for someone with single coverage, let's just say it's just they cover just themselves, that would be a cost of $1,576. If they have family coverage, that would cost $3,713. And then wages, taxes, WRS costs, the cost for basic life, things like that would be an additional $7,064. So for a total cost, if they just have a single plan, that's $8,640. Total cost for family would be $10,777. That's basically extending out their time for 2 months. Now keep in mind the $7,064, which is wages, FICA, WRS costs and life. That would be, in a sense, kind of regardless if I pay it all out at once or if I pay it out over time. The only difference is when you pay out a lump sum, WRS is not included, so that would reduce that amount by approximately $482, I think it was. So under the proposed policy, what it would mean is their final day of work would be March 15th. They would still get paid out their full 5 weeks of vacation. They would get paid out, their comp time and all that stuff. WRS would not be included. And their health, dental, and vision coverage would end at the end of March. So they would get it through March, but then it would end. So for the city, that would be a savings for, if they had a single plan, of approximately $2,020. And for family, if they had a family plan, it would be approximately $4,157. So that's essentially kind of a breakdown of just one example of someone with 20 plus years of experience. It would be a cost savings to go through with the new policy. Some of the things to keep in mind that I had in mind when we were looking at this was, if we have someone who isn't physically working for the city anymore, but is getting benefits, health, dental, vision. There's also the additional risk that maybe there's going to be an increased need for healthcare. Again, definitely understand it, and when you have it, definitely use it. But that could increase costs for the following year based on your utilization rate and things like that. So, there are other things as well to keep in mind. So all those things were on at least my mind when I was going through this policy. So hopefully that answers your question.
And before I call you on Alderman Tompkins, Alderman Ragel, Steve just sent you the information that Sarah is talking about. Did you find that on your email?
No, I did not send it out on email.
No,
I just did about 30 seconds ago, so it will probably pop up for you, hopefully.
Yeah, give me 1 second, I'm refreshing here.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Tompkins.
Thank you. Sarah, this is so helpful to see it like this. So basically, if someone says their working day is the 15th, the proposed policy would be that any time that they have stored up, they would get paid for all of that, but they wouldn't be able to continue with all the benefits and all of that. So that's where the savings is. Under the current policy, if someone has 5 weeks of vacation plus other days, which is, it looks like maybe a month and a half where they're not working, but does that department, if someone isn't working, but they're still getting all that pay and all of the benefits, can that department hire someone new during that time? Or do they have to wait until that person truly is off the payroll?
It kind of depends. So when we're looking at a refill, for example, one of the things that we're going to look at is we always go into it thinking that we're probably going to hire someone that is at either step 1, step 2, or step 3 of that pay scale, as well as potentially taking family benefits. We do that so that we can kind of budget out what the costs would be. So if we have someone who extends out their time, that does eat into the current budget as if that position is still full. So there's potential that we would have to come forth and request a budget resolution to pull some money from somewhere else to offset that, or depending on if there were other savings within the department that could be utilized in place of that, then, so it kind of does really depend, but it could delay filling a position.
Alderman Stauber.
Thank you. Sarah, thanks for the prep work, and I agree too. It's nice to see this layout for comparison. Thank you. I'd like to see options, and I wonder if you considered 2 options that I'm going to ask about. One, putting a cap on the number of consecutive vacation weeks that someone can take. For example, 2 weeks and that's it.
So there is a minimum and a maximum in the new policy, yes. I believe the maximum is 3 weeks at a time in one clip.
Just looking at that option as a way to alleviate some of the concern for grandfather, employees. And the second would be, I guess, just, looking at the tenure. You've got some visibility of staff and how many might retire in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And I'm just wondering if you played with the numbers to see what the impact might be to the city if the 20 years were changed, or the grandfathering deadlines were changed.
yes, I looked at kind of all those options. I think ultimately I kept coming back to the question of where do you draw the line? If we say it's 25 years, if I have 24 years of experience, I'm probably going to be pretty upset that it isn't 20 years. And if it's 20 years, I'm probably going to be pretty upset if I'm at 19 years. There's not really a good point. So the grandfathering piece was really chosen specifically because that is a date where there were individuals who just had never received or received not their full amount of vacation within that first year of service. So that's kind of where that grandfathering date came into play. Definitely, I would say, I wanted to make sure that when we were looking at the policy itself, that we were trying to benefit not only new incoming people that we're going to be trying to attract to come and work here, but also looking at people who have been working here for a long time. I think this was somewhat of a happy medium. I would say definitely I can understand for those who have been here and have a long time service with the city, that it is disappointing that we wouldn't allow the extension of benefits. But when we're in a year and probably many years to come of looking for ways to save money as a city to put towards things like wages or other improved benefits or things like that, I kind of felt like that outweighed this particular option.
Thank you.
Alderman Werman?
Thank you. I'm going to start with a question, which the question would be, and apologies for naivety, with something like this, is this something that comes to the council eventually? Does this just go through finance, budget, personnel, and then once it's approved, it's just kind of a done issue? Or does this eventually come to the council as something that we would discuss and vote on as well?
The policy?
Yeah.
It comes to the council. That's why you're talking about it now. Oftentimes in your meetings, the consent agenda kind of just rolls right through with nothing pulled off. But all these are always options for the council to pull off, which is what Councilmember O'Reilly has done tonight.
Well, yeah, and if I can on that, so that's kind of what I'm asking is it came in the sense of essentially meeting minutes of a meeting that's already passed.
Right.
So I'm wondering, is this a future agenda item for the council, or is this just something that shows up in the notes that you have to pull out in order to discuss?
Yeah, a long time ago, I took to the idea of bullet pointing the items of significance, and there's certain categories, policies, resolutions, contracts, and those kind of things, to make sure the council sees them on the agenda, as was seen tonight under item 3 of the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee. I think, this may be a broader discussion about the way the committees work, and the idea has always been that the committees, Finance, Budget, and Personnel, and Board of Public Works is really where the discussions are baked and a lot of the meat comes out, and the thought being that if the full council sees them to be fit, they can just pass it all with one motion. But anytime any member of the body has questions or concerns about anything that's on those agendas, it's usually bullet pointed. This is fair game for the conversation we're having right now.
No, and that's
I'm still missing your point, I'm guessing.
No, you nailed it.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I was looking for. So, so number one, I'm going to ask if potential that we could maybe do some sort of flash report for major changes like this. Because I do the homework, but again, being newer, I've been here not even a year yet. I didn't know. So my thought was, this is a big deal. This is going to eventually be a council item that we're going to discuss. So thank you, Mike, for bringing this up, because I do think it's definitely something to go over. And then secondly, I think the request would be for items like this. This is something that is kind of a big deal, and it's very budget related. And it's actually a topic that we discussed previously, is potential cuts. And I think as council members, we all really wanted to avoid that. So, my thoughts on something like this would be that that's something I would want as a future agenda item that we could review as a council and talk about options, because I'd really like to see the data behind this. I love that you put it together too, Sarah. This is huge, and it's really helpful to see the breakdown. I'm just interested to see things like, how long are people staying within the city? Are we shortchanging people who have been here 20 years for, 3 people who maybe only were here 3 years? Because we've heard a lot about that tonight. But then in addition, I will say, as somebody who would potentially want to be hired, that scares the crap out of me. If I were to join a company and I'm like, oh, I'm potentially going to have 7 days of benefits, I don't know that I want to join that company. And obviously nobody's really looking ahead at when they're leaving, but I think those are big topics to be discussed prior to making cuts like that. And it's something that I just wouldn't have known that we would have had to pull that out to discuss that prior to it actually being pushed through. So I don't know, I mean, if we want to sidebar on the flash report, but I'm thinking like major changes like that would be good to highlight to some of the council members, without having to kind of filter through to find it.
If I can respond to that, if we could identify and the body agreed to a certain category or categories of issues that ought to come directly to this body, skip the committee system and come straight to the body, whether it be personnel policies, whether it be contracts or whatever. Because I know there's times when people who are not part of the committee that looks at it kind of feel like they're coming in the back end in the conversation, and we're not trying to do that. The idea was to streamline business, but sometimes it does lead to what you're asking right now. With respect to right now, though, I mean, you certainly have the ability, if you want to, as a body, to table this and have it be discussed, reviewed at the next meeting. I mean, that's your prerogative. It's just that most of the items that go through the consent agenda don't bring about that kind of conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's justified. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how we would go about that if it takes a separate motion, but I would definitely like to follow that path. Thank you.
And Alderman O'Reilly, you had a second? I'm sorry. Alderman Varsho?
Well, Sarah, you gave us, the whole council, a whole report on the vacation and on the changes and everything like 3 months ago, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to pick on Mr. Werman here at all, but you gave the council a whole report on this whole thing like 3 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
It came to finance, budget, and personnel 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I understand what Mr. Werman's saying, but the whole council did see this at one point, did see everything that was put together for this plan that she put together. Finance and budget and personnel saw it 3 times. So I understand what he's saying, but I'm kind of missing where we didn't see it as a council.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. Yes, I agree with both of you on this. It is a little overwhelming sometimes to go through all of these separate committees, as a rule of thumb, I typically will always watch the Board of Public Works, or in this case, the Finance, Budget, and Personnel, because that's where the meat and potatoes comes through. We have seen this stuff. This one struck me as odd, and I'm glad that I had that contact with an employee that actually brought it up, because I didn't realize this through that process. So that's why I thought it would be good to have the communication. I don't know that there is an actual way that we would be able to break out every item. I mean, we could categorize it and go for certain things, but I don't know if anybody has any ideas on that. I guess I'd have an open mind to it, but I think what it boils down to is you pretty much have to go through the process and try to figure them out. And I'll miss things, we all do. That's a lot of pages to go through, but I'm open to any discussion on it.
Alderman Werman?
Yeah, thank you. And Brian, no, you bring up a good point. It was not as concerning that I thought we hadn't seen it. It was more that I was not under the understanding of once that's voted on by Finance, Budget, and Personnel, that makes it official. That was more concerning to me. It's like we've seen the proposals, but to me, they're just proposals until we vote on it as a body. And that's what I was saying is this affects the entire city department, group, all the departments, and, anybody who wants to join in the future. That's a lot of what we're talking about as a council. So I think if for things like that, I mean, I'm on public works, so maybe it doesn't seem as detrimental as, like a human resources type situation, but I think of it the same way. If we, did some huge contract and spent a lot of money and just approved it, and then you guys are just reading about it in the notes, it's kind of like, well, hold up, why aren't we voting on that? Don't we get a say? And so I see things like that and I'm like, not every topic, Steve, because like I said, I do the homework, I read the notes, but for me, it's more the votes of, hey, now that this is passed, this is going to go through. Do we want to pull this out? That's a bigger deal because like I said, it's not super clear in the notes. So I'm glad Mike pulled it out because I didn't know that meant, hey, this is official. But it's definitely something that I would want to bring up at a future topic for us to discuss. So hopefully that clears that up. Sorry.
Alderman Tompkins?
I'm hearing that this would be a great onboarding topic as well, that we do need to remember that when we approve the consent agenda, we're approving everything that's already gone through these committees. And I didn't realize this as well when I started, and I remember when the utilities was buying land that was showing up on their minutes, and it wasn't getting pulled, and we were just approving the huge expenditures, and then I pulled it from the consent agenda because I was like, wait, the council actually has to, it's over $25,000. We actually have to approve this. And the response from the utilities was, well, when you approve the consent agenda, you approve it. And I'm like, no, we actually have to individually vote on that. So I guess my takeaway from this discussion would be, can we maybe think through a little better what we would need to pull from consent agendas? That probably is the takeaway.
I guess I'm going to add my own item for future agendas after all the talk about trying to get caught up on this topic. But yeah, I think it'd be worthwhile if in maybe the next agenda that I walk through the things that we pull now that I pull and why. And we can talk about whether or not those are satisfactory in terms of flagging them for the body, at the very least bullet pointing. I assume that when you don't see bullet points, you see all the minutes of all these different meetings, you may not read through them and not realize some of the things that you're blessing by accepting them. And that's why I call out things like contracts and resolutions and personnel policies. But it's a good topic. And I think we can do that at the next meeting.
If I can say one thing. One good thing too, and one of the reasons why I was able to have what I had tonight for everybody is that I was kind of asked and questioned on this. And so it was really helpful for me as a staff person to be able to come tonight really prepared to hopefully answer questions that there were. Yeah. So if ever at all possible, I love that. I love, number one, just answering the questions, but number two, I like doing the research because I don't always, off the top of my head, I wouldn't have been able to provide you with this information off the top of my head tonight. So anything like that is really helpful for us as staff too. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Alderman Fire?
I'm going to play the devil's advocate on this. If everybody in this room that has a vote on this was sitting at 20 plus years as an employee, would you vote for this? Would you be happy with this as an employee of the city of Marshfield? Probably not. Also, and I think that when you look at how this policy is going to change, you may find that when you got to look at how vacations are handled outside these walls, you may find out that employing people for a long length of time may not happen if that's decided. So I'm not going to vote for this because I think I wouldn't want to say, well, if I was working for the city for 20, 25 years, and I'm going to cut a policy that I was living with for the last 25 years. It's just not fair to the employee.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess in my old age, I've grown rather cynical, and I've come to believe that there's an adaptation of an old saying about the evil that men do, and the evil that men do lies in the consent agenda. And that's why, as an alderman, you got to look through those things. You at least have to thumb through them and highlight the things that you don't understand. Because, some of the things that they're doing, or most of the things they're doing, are perfectly legitimate. The best way to do it, some informed by best practices. But if we don't read it, we miss something good. So, I do take the time to read those things. And I encourage you to do the same thing. So thank you.
Alderman Varsho?
I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what Mr. Fire said, as I do agree with him as an employee, but I do have a family member that worked at a company for 43 years. They changed their policy when he was there for 31 years because they could carry over as much vacation as they wanted, and they had a former employee that was on the books for 6 months after he retired. So they changed their policy. My dad was there for 31 years, and then when he got to 43 years, whatever he got for vacation and everything, they paid him out one lump sum because of the fact of sitting on the books for 6 months after you retired. And I understand it's difficult when you work for someone for that long. I just celebrated my 15th year at Marshfield Insurance, and it's not the same as this policy here. the proposed one it is, but we can't very much carry that much overtime over. How much vacation, or how much can you have, Sarah? How much can you have as a total? Let's say if someone carried over some vacation, how much time could it, I mean, your example here says, what, like 2 months? Can it be 3-4 months that they'll be on the books?
It kind of depends on how much other stuff they have. So if they have, if they're in a job that has, let's say, a holiday, extra holiday time, or if they have lots of comp time, some can have a lot of comp time. So it could be, I would say probably the max would be probably 3 months if you really kind of played it out. However, I say that, and let's just say I carry over 2 weeks of vacation from one end of an anniversary into the next anniversary. That would be 2 weeks that would also get paid out. So you can see how you can kind of compound things. So it really depends. I think the biggest thing is that we were just looking at the whole big picture for vacation. We were looking at not only just new incoming potential employees, but also taking a look at people who have been here for a long extended period of time. So there are definitely still some things that I think are good things for even people who have been here for a long time. But there were just some decisions that had to be made because I'll be honest, if I had brought that policy forward and said that's going to be an extra $5,000 per certain employees, I'm not quite sure I probably would have gotten it even past finance, budget, and personnel as a past policy to bring forward.
So in that aspect too, I mean, and again, I agree with Mr. Fire. It's really detrimental to the longtime employees here that, you know, this proposed plan, okay, so you're retiring and we're going to pay you out for all the vacation you have, but it does have a adverse effect on other things as well. If you're covered for another 2 months for the medical insurance. If something catastrophic happens and you make a huge claim on the medical insurance, what's going to happen to your medical premiums the next year? They're going to go up. I mean, I understand it 100% that it's disappointing for some people that have been here a very long time, but there's a lot of companies that I would assume are going the proposed way instead of the other way.
Most are requiring you to work out your entire, if you say I'm putting in my 2-week notice, they're requiring you to work your full 2 weeks or your full 4 weeks, whatever the requirement is in order to get any sort of payout. I would say the majority of places, not all, but I would say the majority are moving that direction. This was kind of, again, a happy medium with that where we're only requiring half.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to start. I normally don't speak at some of these things, but I want to start, first of all, for commending the great job that Sarah has done throughout this entire vacation policy. And it's been very hard. There have been a lot of difficult discussions with employees and groups of employees who've had concerns. And I think we've addressed some of those before. Here's my thought on this. Grandfathering is something that I think works well sometimes and sometimes not as well. There's times when you just have to make a change, and it may be not popular with everybody, but at some level, if you grandfathered every policy you had, you'd have the vast majority of employees under a policy that it would take years and years and years to wind down. And so, I mean, I think in this case, what Sarah's tried to do, and I've agreed with her, is try to make sure people get compensated for what they've earned, what they've rightfully acquired in terms of their vacation time, and yet do it in a different way. The runout does produce some concerns for us as an organization in multiple ways, in multiple avenues. And I think this is a good attempt to balance those interests. I know not everybody agrees. People who are in a boat where they're nearing retirement and it doesn't look as good for them as what they hoped. But I think it's a fair balancing attempt for this particular end of career moment. I just do as best we could do and try to control costs at the same time.
Any other comments, questions? I see we have a motion on the floor by Mr. O'Reilly, and your motion will be?
First thing I'll say is, Sarah, just giving you a heads up, I sure didn't mean to hit you over the head with this. I had read the agenda and I watched the video today. That's where I caught it. And that's why it got brought up after that email. So I would always try to call you first. I think we've discussed this quite a bit. And I think at this point, I am going to make a motion to send this back to staff for further review. And I guess just to test the pulse of the council and find out if that's where you want to go or if we want to go a different direction.
And is there a second to that motion? Second by Alderman Werman. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Oh, Alderman Stauber, just under the bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I was kind of holding myself here.
I was watching you.
So compliments to Alderman Tompkins for the onboarding catch. There is a lot to learn when you're new to the council, and paying it or reading through the agenda packets that maybe aren't as relevant to the committee that you sit on are sometimes difficult. And if you don't have time to review the meeting, the replay, which does help when you do that. And I think Mike just said that. So I also appreciate the comments from Alderman Varsho, because to me, it's you use this phrase, it probably hit me over the head with it, but kind of the real world. And I'm in the private sector. When I was on the council beginning 1999, we brought a lot of the private sector thoughts to public sector, and we were trying to identify why these gaps occurred. And it wasn't fun, but there were some changes that were made. Things that were benefits for people in the public sector just didn't exist in the private sector. And I know that you can't draw a straight line comparison between the two, but I view this as a similar. It's not ideal, especially for someone that's been working with the city for a long time. But I'm a realist also. I've been employed for 35 plus years, and my current employer, we changed ownership, I think 3 times, maybe 4, coming up on 5th, and everything changes, So I've got a lot of vacation accrued. I'm an at-will employee. I can leave anytime I want. They can let me go anytime they want. That's the real world. And if they want to change the vacation policy, I'll deal with that. I'm limited on 2 weeks vacation maximum, unless I get special permission to take 3 consecutive weeks. That's why I asked that question. So these are one of the hard decisions I think the council needs to make, and I do appreciate the work on behalf of staff, finance, budget, and personnel. They did their work, and I think the committees, that's where the work is done. And we can ratify to choose not to vote for it if we want to. But I think the process as is good. I do appreciate Administrator Barr pulling these out and identifying them as, maybe more important topics. That's helpful. So we don't lose them in the consent agenda, but you can't please everyone all the time. And I think this is one of those examples. So I would, again, compliment staff, and I'll support the proposal policy and not the motion on the floor right now. Thank you.
Alderman Weigel, then Alderman Spiros.
Thank you. Sarah, just briefly here, just so people who are either just tuning in for the first time or just seeing this without reading over the lengthy agenda, what was the scope of the revamp of the vacation policy? Did we redo the entire policy, just the end part of it? What do we all do as far as the vacation policy?
The red line version is pretty red. So it was pretty much the entire policy. So it was looking really from top to bottom. It identified and defined what accrual means. It changed the amounts of accruals, a lot of the rules around when you terminate, adding a conversion for sick leave, changing sick leave if you qualify into vacation. minimums, maximums, how much you can use, who's qualified for it. It was a pretty extensive update, which is why it did take so long to bring forward to Finance, Budget, and Personnel.
Okay, and I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but would I be correct in describing this as modernizing our vacation policy?
Yes, I would definitely say it's basically redefining and bringing it to what I would say a majority of private, and I would say also to a lot of municipalities are bringing forward as well as far as vacation goes.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Mr. Marshall brought up the fact that Personnel Finance Committee has seen this 3 times. At what point during the discussion was there pushback about the fact that we're giving too much vacation? Do you recall?
So I think that was when I had brought it forth to the Common Council, where I had talked about all the different things that we could potentially do. Part of it was the vacation, part of it was adding personal holiday days, part of it was a volunteer day, things like that, when I gave a lot of options. And then there was discussion on, I think, a reduction in some of just reducing the amount of time off that we were looking at in total, which brought it down to tabling some of it and really moving forward with vacation.
Okay, and then one question here. And correct me if I'm wrong here, you understand this much better than I do. The way I'm reading the example you handed out here, it looks to me like, and I just pull this up again here. It looks to me like the biggest difference here is the fact that instead of paying out vacation under the current policy, the vacation just rides. So the person would just take, let's say they have 5 weeks for argument's sake. They take their 5 weeks vacation and then they have their last day of employment. And so we extend benefits throughout the vacation part, whereas the current policy is instead of keeping you on the books for an additional 5 weeks, we pay you out for your vacation, but then the benefits end that month of your last day of work. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So while I understand, and I'm going to echo Mr. Stauber's point here, is that we're in a position here where we're not going to make everyone happy. Someone's going to be upset. And yes, understand that someone who's at the sunset of their career understands that, they're trying to offboard, if you want to call it that, or just retire. And they're trying to coordinate the timing of policies, Medicaid, COBRA, take your pick of coverage here. But it appears to me that the amount of people that are going to be grandfathered in for something like this, or that's going to be affected by a long-term change, could potentially, finagle the system, so to say, or at least time it better to coordinate everything. Now, that might mean they work a little bit longer, and we're talking another month, not years, to coordinate that. And then on the flip side, I'll be remiss to not commend you on this. We sit here as a council and bang our fists on the table saying, we need to cut costs, and to find a way to cut costs, whether it's $10 here, whether it's 10 grand here. And you've come up with a way that, frankly, I think is very sensible to do it. And we're sitting here saying, well, we don't like it. I'm looking at this, seeing that we revamped everything. We increased the holidays. We increased time off for a lot of people. We've modernized the system here. And Mr. Stauber's, but we're not going to make everyone happy. And we found a word here that is one of those that someone's not going to be happy about. And I think to shelve the whole thing and send it back to staff just seems we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So I'll be supporting this as proposed with this here. Thank you.
Alderman Spiros?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say a couple of things. First, I do want to commend Sarah because she's put in a tremendous amount of work on this policy, and we've already sent it back to her once. It wasn't like we didn't ever send it back. We did send it back, and that was due to some things that were brought up by employees that we kind of brought her attention to, and she was like, hey, let me relook at that. So that's kind of been done, and I commend her, and I know how much work she's put behind this, and she has presented it a lot of times. My only question would be, have you had an in-service with employees explaining the difference, or does this simply just come out through an email as a policy change?
So what we did, we knowing that this was going to be a sensitive topic, I've brought it up a few times at our department head meetings. I've had one-on-one conversations with some groups that have requested it. When we were doing benefit discussions at the end of the year, this was brought up, so we did answer a lot of questions kind of in smaller group settings. We've definitely sent out versions of, this potentially could be the policy, review it, send us your comments, send us your concerns. So definitely I would say if anyone at the city is really surprised by this policy change, I would be really shocked because we really have been talking about it as a city for a while, even knowing that, saying over and over again, this is a draft. This is not set in stone. This could easily change, and we wanted it to be a very fluid thing, which I will 100% say I'm not used to because in the private sector, I've never had to have this much discussion about a policy before. I usually just say, this is what I recommend, and then it goes. But I liked this process. It was frustrating at some times just because, you put so much time into it, but it's been worthwhile because I do think that I was able to hear from a lot of different perspectives. And it's tough when you have some employees who you're going to disappoint. I think that's probably the most frustrating for me just because I like to have all happy employees. But with this one, we really had to look at what was good for most employees and what was good for the city and try and find somewhere in between. And truthfully, I feel like this was probably the best place that we could get to.
So with that said, I commend you then for doing that. I was only going to suggest maybe an actual, in-service where people could come, but it sounds like you've covered those bases sufficiently. And you're right. The hardest part is when you disappoint employees, and that's the hardest part, I think, for most of us up here too. But we do, people hear me say this all the time, and I hate to sound like a broken record. We really do have a tight financial budget to work with. And as was said earlier, we're constantly looking for things that can save money, and with the least negative impact for employees. And I know that, Sarah, you looked at the numbers, you ran numbers, you looked at grandfathering, you did all that kind of stuff. And it is really, really difficult to come back and have disappointed employees, especially those with a lot of tenure. Just simply because they dedicate themselves here, you feel like you owe them something. And I totally agree with that. And so it's sort of a disappointment, but I'm going to support the policy as presented by Sarah, because I know that she did not leave any stones unturned.
Alderman Werman?
I'll keep my thoughts brief. Sure, we've spent enough time on this. So my thought process here is, and I think Mike's in agreement, we absolutely, by not wanting to just push this through, are not disagreeing with the fact that you put in a lot of work and it's much appreciated. So I hope you know that. And my only thoughts on this really are, I've been a part of a couple of big companies where changes like this have happened. And as an employee, it makes me not want to be there anymore. We literally spent months last year prior to me coming onto the council. And then when I was on the council, on an employee satisfaction survey. And now we're taking the employees and saying, hey, we understand you were already unhappy about things. We're going to make it more difficult. And it may be a small change, but it's for the people that are currently here. And that was my thought process behind Mike's motion, is that I would like to see something like this benefit the current employees and change for future employees, simply because I do think the people that have been here a long time are going to feel very not appreciated. And I know, as somebody who's been in those situations, I would just want to leave. And one of the things that we've been looking at is not just bringing on new employees, but keeping the current employees happy so that things do flow well. And we don't want to run into situations like that. So that was my thought process. And again, that's why I'll support Mike's motion on this, but I appreciate everyone's input and somehow agree with everyone's points at the same time.
Just before we vote on the motion, if this discussion is winding down, first of all, I want to commend Sarah, and I stand 100% by the proposal. I think she's done her best to try and hear from everybody. But the motion itself, I just want to clarify, if I can, what happens if it's sent back? Are you expecting staff to do something? What are the next steps? Because I think at that point, we might be a little confused of what's expected of us.
Correct.
Yeah, in all reality, when I made the motion, it was more or less, we've been talking about this a long time tonight and wanted to check the pulse on the council. Do we want to move in that direction and potentially get input from the council on what we should do? Or do we want to shoot that down and approve it or disprove it? Just trying to give some finality to it, in all honesty.
I just want to make sure if the motion passes, we don't walk out of this room and you're expecting staff to do something and we're not sure what that is. That's all I'm trying to clarify.
Understood.
Any other questions, comments? Jessica, would you please read that motion?
Hang on one second. Mr. O'Reilly, were you trying to amend your motion? Yeah. Is that a no?
This is very confusing.
Were you trying to amend?
Yes, I guess. Well, we will amend it to say it was going back to staff and ask for staff to come back and, or council to come back and give options.
Yes, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Werman. Any other discussion? And please, Jess, one more time, would you please read that motion? I apologize. I just want everybody to make sure that they all know what page we're on, 6, 8, or 10, or 2.
We're amending the original motion to have council give options to staff.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote on the amendment.
Mr. Reigel?
No.
Amendment does not pass. And Alderman O'Reilly, you had a second.
We need to go back to the original motion.
We already.
That was the amendment.
Okay.
So now we have the original motion, which is to send back to staff.
Original motion is sent back to staff. Motion by Alderman O'Reilly, second by Alderman Werman. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Reigel?
No.
That motion does not pass. Okay, now Alderman O'Reilly.
We need to have something happen with this.
We have the one other one after that too.
Pardon me?
We'll need to have something. We need to have something approve that that policy. I'm sorry. It failed, but we need to do something with it. It's just hanging out there in the consent agenda right now. Staff doesn't agree with.
Because we already voted back to keep it the way that it was, correct?
No, they voted to send it back to staff and that motion failed.
Right.
So right now there's nothing happening. That policy is just hanging out in a consent agenda. It was pulled. It's just out there. He removed it from the consent though.
Well, doing nothing. You're doing nothing, so it should be all equal. Because you're right, because the motion did not pass, so there should be nothing on the table because it did not pass.
Since we're all thinking out loud, can I play too? I was thinking, I know Councilmember O'Reilly has another item he wants to talk about on the consent agenda, and maybe we just have the discussion on that one, and then come back and see if somebody wants to make a motion on either one of those two items.
Yep, I know, I see that. Alderman Reigel?
I'd make a motion to approve the minutes of the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve.
Mr. Reigel, is that on that specific item as you already voted on the rest of the minutes?
Correct, on the specific item that was pulled.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Because right now we have a motion on the floor by Alderman O'Reilly, and we also have a motion on the floor by Alderman Weigel. So we have now a motion by Alderman Weigel and a second by Alderman Tompkins. Any other discussion about 14.3 to approve the revised city policy number 0.3.510 vacation? Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Well,
Alderman Stauber.
I just wanted to make it clear, we're voting to approve the policy as presented.
Correct.
Okay.
Please vote.
Mr. Weigel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Now, Alderman O'Reilly, you have a second?
I'm sorry.
No, you're not.
No, probably not. It was good discussion. The second item that I wanted to have discussion about was item K.12.3, the relocation of the communications department. And in my memory, this has been hanging out there a long time. And if I'm not mistaken, when this was kind of moved forward, there was the understanding that they were going to be moved in by the end of the year and that the cost was going to be quite insignificant. And now we're looking at engineering to be done. And I'm a little concerned that what we're moving forward with is not actually what the council had suspected that it was going to turn out to be. So I don't know that it would have moved forward like it did if this were the case. I guess I just wanted to test, again, the pulse of the council and see if everybody else understands this the way I did, or if I just want to make sure there's no confusion through this process.
Tom, you want to address it? I can start out as Tom goes up there. I mean, once upon a time, we were estimating this to be, I think, even $100,000, and then came down, did a lot of looking at the basement, trying to figure out what rooms might work and how we would rework them. Tom, you maybe want to touch on the process?
Okay, and process to me was that they were planning to move to City Hall, so I had to find a designer to redesign the space so that it would fit their needs down there. I'm assuming it's going to be roughly, I've never bid something like this, within the budget of around $50,000 based upon what they're proposing. I never made a comment that we'd be done by the end of the year. That never came from my department or myself. Because it took time to find someone that was willing to actually do the design for this, and I still have to bid it out. So we were looking ahead at a proposed bidding timeline. We did a pause on that here just shortly because we're doing something internally, but it is still moving forward at this time.
If I can add to that too, we've had a couple times during the process, maybe this didn't help the timeline, where we've actually considered other alternatives. I mean, there's been talk about other commercial buildings nearby that might accommodate the use of Tom and David, what they need for a good communications department. So we've kind of stopped to make sure we were still on the right track as far as the best option. And that maybe has taken a little bit longer. And we are going to come to you with a budget resolution looking to pay a little bit more to carry out our time with the old building. The lease expires over in the former City Hall on March 31st, and it looks like we're probably going to carry into the spring a little bit. So, that cost we were not hoping for, but we've been trying to do everything right to make sure that we're doing a good process to give them a good space, well-designed, and hopefully will last a long time.
Go ahead, Tom.
Just one more comment. It's basically going to be 2 offices and a studio. The studio fits in a corner of the basement where we used to store some of the equipment for IT. You have insulated walls, so there's a little bit more design into the walls and such in that area down there. But it's about 25% larger than their current studio, so it'll function better. And then they have each their individual offices right next door to it.
Thank you. Alderman Wagner?
Thank you, Mayor. I think some of the confusion about this and whether end of the year or whatever, I know that we didn't budget for anything past, what was it, February? Or was it March?
End of March.
So that basically, that's not just the end of the year, that's dead end eternity for communications if they don't get relocated. So I think that's where some of the confusion about what the rush was. I think that's where that came from.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. Yeah, one of the items that just had crossed my mind when looking through this and remembering it the way I did, I had thought, we have a new building we own now. Is that a potential? Have we looked at any other options downtown that we had discussed in the past that could potentially work out? And just making sure that we're on track with what everybody expected to see.
We literally looked at an alternative of a downtown building within the last 2 weeks, just trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing to go forward with this project. And we're trying to do this project as efficiently, as effectively as we can. We don't want to spend any more money than we need to, but I think we're on the right track, and I'm sort of looking forward to it getting done now.
Any other comments, questions? We have a motion to, actually, Alderman O'Reilly, would you please tell us your motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
There's a second by Alderman Wagner. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. And thank you again, Mike. And don't ever feel you can't bring something forth. That's why we work together. Correct, everybody?
Yep,
yes.
Agreed.
And Derek, there is no question that is not the right question. The wrong question is one you don't ask. How's that? So item L we can take off because we have taken care of both of those items. Moving on to item M, second reading of ordinance number 1505, remote participation in council and committee meetings, presented by Steve Bard, City Administrator.
Well, thank you, Mayor. The last time we talked about this was on January 9th, so it's been a little over a month now. At that time, it was a second reading of the ordinance that would put a framework and guidelines, parameters around remote participation in meetings of the council and our committees. And at that time, some concerns were raised and discussed at some length. One of them being the requirement that you can't participate remotely for more than 3 weeks worth of meetings. There was some discussion also as far as the reconnection. What if you lose your connection? What happens then? Some of the things with the internet that might go wrong and whether or not they can be addressed. I think we had some discussion about closed session, things that happen when people participate in closed session and there's maybe a concern about the confidentiality of what's going on. So at the end of the day, so to speak, the council directed this back to staff. All council members were asked to send me their ideas, suggestions, concerns, whatever, and to send those to me by email. 10 days went by after that meeting and I received comments from 2 of the members of this body. Then I followed up on January 20th and sent an email prompting them, saying, look, in case you haven't weighed in, I'm looking for you to weigh in with any good, bad, and ugly that you have with respect to this ordinance. I then heard from 2 more members. So total, I heard from 4 of the body as we sit here tonight. 2 of those members raised concern about what was already mentioned in respect to the 3-week maximum time consecutively of weeks of meetings where you participate remotely. One of those same members raised a question about being able to reconnect. That is it right that if you're just out for a little bit, your connection falls apart? Can you not jump back in if you can get in within 5 minutes and participate in the discussion and the ultimate vote on said item? Another member, I think, was generally supportive of the ordinance as it is right now, but raised a question about closed sessions and saying, look, I don't think you should be able to participate at all in a closed session remotely. There's too much up for grabs in terms of your seclusion, confidentiality. There's kids or spouses in the room that can hear what's going on and it's about a contract or whatever. And maybe it's best to just have remote participation in open session items only. And then another member just emailed me and said, look, I'm fine with the way it reads today. I think it's good and appropriate. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I didn't get as much input or comment as I was hoping for. At some level, you can say, well, did the people who not commented, does that mean that they like it as written? Does it mean they just aren't passionate about this one way or the other? So I was kind of left with what to do. I met with the city clerk. We talked about this, and I felt it was best to bring it back in the same form that we brought to you on January 9th and just flag these. I certainly respect all the concerns that are being raised. I respect the concern about the constituents potentially being left off if their representative can't participate. I respect the concern about closed session and the reconnection concerns that we have about somebody being away and what does that mean. But I don't feel like there was enough information really to change staff's presentation or recommendation. So I'm just going to leave it to the body. Officially, staff is recommending approval of ordinance 1505 as presented back on January 9th. with the understanding that there may well be a motion here by the body to modify that in some way. And then hopefully there'll be a good discussion and there'll be some resolution. I will tell you this, we need to adopt an ordinance. We really do. We've gone way too long without an ordinance that addresses remote meetings. COVID is long gone in the rearview mirror, and we've been allowing something without any kind of guidance or parameters that we need to have. So whatever comes out of this conversation, whatever is ultimately adopted, definitely want to get a policy on the books to govern the topic.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you. Start off, I'm going to say I'm pretty frustrated that this came back in the same form after the discussion, because we could have just finished it last time. I think it was beat to death last time about the meeting attendance. And at the last meeting, I asked, what is one advantage that we gain by limiting the amount of remote access to these meetings? I have still never been able to come up with one, and I have never heard of one. What we are going to do is impact our constituents' representation. I just cannot wrap my head around that 2 meetings are okay, or 3 meetings are okay. And if you attend another meeting, then 2 more meetings are okay. I don't care what anybody in this state is doing. Jessica, when you talk to these people, did they tell you what the advantage was to doing this? I mean, we discussed this last time. We don't have people sitting at home, not coming to the meetings, so you're not going to increase attendance. This is just completely illogical to me. So I will not support anything that has that in there, for starters. I am open to having discussions about some of the other stuff that's in there, and I do understand the need for a policy. The part about not being being able to attend virtually to closed session. Now, for instance, that one, I understand the concept, but I also have concerns about that one too, because there is a certain amount of professional respect that's given to a council member that they're not going to walk out of this meeting and tell people what happened in closed session. And I think that same amount of respect has to be relayed to if someone is sitting in a room. It's the same type of situation. It's their responsibility to make sure that information doesn't get past their ears. The whole thing, I don't know, the whole thing just reeks to me of we're doing it because somebody else is doing it, and that is as illogical as things can be, in my opinion. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm sure there's a lot more discussion.
Alderman Werman?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Mike on this one. Mike, we're having a weird night. That's 2 topics. First of all, I'm going to apologize to Steve and to this body, because I was definitely one of the ones that said I would get you feedback. And I know there's no excuse. It has been super busy, and I just failed to do that. So I am sorry. I would like to echo some of Mike's comments, and I had a few thoughts. I've put a lot of thought into this since I saw this agenda come out. I think it was Friday. I read it over the weekend, and I was thinking more and more about it, and I think I feel a lot more passionately about it now than I did at the last meeting. And for multiple reasons. Number one is I need to know what the driver is. What is the root cause as to why we need this policy in place? Is it just because there's a policy needed? Is it because we're having issues with attendance, like Zoom issues? Like, I need to better understand what the reasoning is.
At its core, it's the lack of a policy of any kind right now. Now, it was prompted in part, we all know, by the incident where, Councilmember Stauber had a connection that wasn't working, and it kind of affected the meeting, no fault of his. And it kind of brought us to the realization that perhaps a meeting might actually have to stop. But apart from that, again, we've gone a long time since COVID, and most every other city and village has a policy. They allow, in most cases, remote participation, but they have some framework. What does it mean? What's expected of a person participating remotely? So that's why we have it. The part about 3 weeks of meetings being a maximum that you can participate remotely, and again, I think Jessica's pointed out that she's become aware that many cities have something like that. Maybe they even say 2 weeks in some cases. I think the premise is, right, wrong, or otherwise, that for the most part, the expectation is that you be here in person. So when people are here, you can interact with them directly, except on circumstances like, a work commitment or vacation or whatever that comes up from time to time. Some people in this room may feel that that's flawed, because if you can participate remotely and represent your constituents, that's good. But I think staff bringing this forward, I hope that however this vote goes down, that staff isn't unduly criticized out of this, because we're literally trying to find our way to a policy that seems reasonable. And admittedly, we are tracking other cities, as we do with chicken ordinances and everything else, to see what's out there in the rest of the state. But that we just felt that was maybe a good place to land in terms of a proposal. And I think that is the premise. So I'll say it one more time before I stop talking here. That is, for the most part, the expectation is it will be here. Sometimes you can't be. So you can argue about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I truly believe that there ought to be some limit. And maybe there are people in this room who don't. Some limit at what point you really ought to be in the room and interacting with the constituents who come to these meetings and the other staff members and your peers who are present. My personal feeling.
Understood. Oh, yeah, you go ahead, Pat.
So first of all, I don't have a personal feeling about it. One thing that I said when we had the incident where somebody dropped off is, coming out of that, I was very adamant, we need a policy. Mm-hmm. And the reason was to deal with that situation where somebody falls off and you do not have a way to deal with that. At that point, even when one person fell off, we don't have a policy. My opinion was we had to stop the meeting. That's the problem. And you could, in that instance, if we don't address it, have questions about voting and quorum and presence, because we don't have a way to address that. That said, in terms of just having a policy, it certainly would be my recommendation that you have some kind of policy. I don't care if it is everybody can appear remotely anytime they want. That doesn't matter. But the reason is that there is a presumption when basically based on meeting procedure that everyone's here. So there's a presumption when we have meetings that they're in person. It's not normal to do that. Now, we did normalize some of that during COVID, but that was because there were rules that were generated to do that. Now, in the absence of that emergency situation, we're kind of left with, okay, we've got this remnant, but no actual official rule. So the way that this is actually running then is that because the mayor is the chair, it's up to her whether she would allow somebody to appear remotely or not appear remotely without having something decided by the body. So that's my recommendation. You do something to do that. And most importantly is we have some way to address that one question of if somebody falls off, my recommendation was that you have a presumption that they left the meeting voluntarily, in the sense that you don't have the question that we have to bring them back on before you take any additional action.
Thank you both for the clarity on that. And thanks a lot, Russ. This is your fault. Just kidding, but no. So it brings up a good point, and that's 100% what I wanted to focus on. Is it sounds like there is a need, and that's the driver. It's not necessarily transparency. It's not necessarily, because I know there was a couple things thrown out last time, like having a face here for citizens to come in and see. And that was something that was tossed out there. So what I wanted to do, and I don't know if we'll have to amend this as a motion if I wanted to do this, but I think we need to push this back at some point and have staff focus more on the bigger issue, for example, closed session. Because it sounds like that was probably more of the concern, or whether or not it drops us below a quorum. And focusing on things like that, because I do think a couple of big concerns around this, if we put this into effect, is you're going to have people who are a lot less interested in being on council. I mean, I ran unopposed. So I look at that and I'm like, already we had a tough time in our district of somebody wanting to sign up. And I did, knowing that I don't have a travel position right now. But if I'm looking at one, I'm not even a year into council. Am I going to have to forfeit my position if I can't be here on Tuesdays? So things like that are concerning to me. I'm still invested in the city. And I think anybody who is, traveling for work or something like that is still going to be invested in the city because they live here. They might have kids in the school district. Like, there is a lot to care about whether or not you can be in person or not. if it is about closed session outside of dropping off, I do think there's a level, to Mike's point, there's a level of trust and responsibility that you have already to not take anything from closed session and speak about it. And I feel like that should be the exact same if you're attending virtually. The responsibility is on you to not be in an area where people are going to hear it. And I do think that a couple things we could look at in addition to that is whether or not we should have some sort of travel exception for business roles or illnesses or things like that. And I know that there was concern last time about staff having that control over the body, and that's what I'm wondering is maybe that comes down to a council discussion. And then I think you could also do a couple other things. For example, if a candidate is running or going up for re-election, you could have some sort of transparency where there needs to be a note that, hey, this person does have a travel role or this person is expecting to travel frequently and may not be in attendance. So that might sway your vote on who represents you. And then lastly, also, this could be something we could do is provide future remote attendees. I mean, I would think with Jessica providing agendas 3 days, 4 days prior to a meeting, we should know if people are going to be traveling. Now, you can't account for illnesses and being sick that day, but you could list remote attendees or potentially remote attendees on there for more transparency. So I think we should push this back. And again, I apologize for not providing these thoughts earlier, but I do think that there's still some work that needs to be done on this policy.
I'm just going to provide a couple of points of clarity. So first off, if we were going to go with the norm of just what other municipalities are doing, we would not allow remote attendance at all. Most municipalities across the state are not allowing any remote attendance or one meeting per calendar year. So the 3 weeks that we put in the policy, Steve and I discussed this at length before it went in, was very, very generous compared to other municipalities. So I just want to put that out there again. We weren't trying to hold you to a standard of someone else on that point. The closed session, most are not allowing that. Steve and I really talked about that as well. Hap was involved with that conversation. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice tonight. And we felt that that would be just so limiting for the necessity of those conversations for your constituents. So exactly why remote should be allowed was also why we left the remote or the closed session in there, because as Mr. O'Reilly pointed out, you do have a certain responsibility for that. So I just wanted to clarify that we really looked at other municipalities and gave a very generous leeway. Again, most of the state is not at all allowing remote attendance, and at most one time per calendar year.
Alderman Rooney, are you finished? Okay, thank you. Alderman Spiros?
Thank you. Just in reviewing, looking at this policy, I agree. I think I really don't care what other municipalities are doing. I mean, doesn't make a difference to me. Remote participation is being utilized by companies all over this country. There's people who have never even been to their home office ever, and they're fine employees. They conduct their work well. They do just fine. Modern day, has created the evolution of the internet and remote meetings and cameras and all that kind of stuff. So I don't even want to talk about that part because to me that's just silly. So I agree with Mike when he says, who decides how many meetings? Like, are you effective if you attend 3 meetings in a row and then skip one and then you miss 3 again and then you skip one and then is that what we're driving for? Because that's what you'll get. Somebody who's going to be gone longer than 3 things, they'll attend their 3 remote meetings and they'll just skip the 4th one and then they'll, if they want, they can attend 3 more remote meetings if they want to. I mean, there's a big workaround for that. So it's kind of a silly thing for me. In addition to anybody who has to get consent has to get it from the mayor or the city administrator. I don't know. It doesn't make any difference to me. D and E are contradictory to each other in the policy. Maybe bring the policy back up because somehow it went away here. Give me 1 second. So 4D says lost connection in the event that the connection is lost with any member attending remotely, regardless of the cause thereof, such connection shall be treated the same as the remote member of the body voluntarily leaving. In such event, the member's absence shall be noted on the record and the meeting shall continue. And then 5 says reconnection. In the event a member attending remotely is able to reconnect. So that's contradictory. You're saying 4, that if they lose connection, they're out. 5, you're saying if they can connect. So that's not even, doesn't make sense. Because those letters don't even go together. Closed session, I agree with Mike. I mean, what's the difference if I attend closed session here and I go to Nuts Deep and I tell everybody 5 minutes later after I walked out of here what happened? There's a trust issue. You know, you're sworn in, you know what your duties are, you know what your obligations are, and that's what you should be doing. I do know, just because I'm married to a state representative, that at the state they utilize phone. They don't do their meetings by Zoom, but they do calls all the time where the members call in. They're not even on camera. These people are just on the phone conducting meetings. So it is allowed at a state level. And that's a much bigger body than what we have here. So I just wanted to point that out. I will not support this for a number of reasons. I do think that when you start to limit people from attending, you are limiting their constituents from being represented. I've been on this council a long time. There's reasons that I attend remotely. So to pull the wool out from under my feet, again, that is in the middle of my term. That's not encouraging for me to rerun again. And I think that's the same with a couple of other members who regularly attend remotely. They were told that they could do that when they got elected, and to pull that wool out from under their feet midway just doesn't seem conducive to me. So I will not support this policy. I do believe that you can come up with a policy in regards to losing connection, and whether that results in no quorum, then the meeting ends. And I just want to remind people that when Russ did lose his connection, because he was, you know, I mean, we didn't have a quorum, and so we had to stop the meeting. But had he not been able to attend at all, we wouldn't have a quorum at all for the entire meeting. The meeting would have been stopped before it ever got started. So there would have been no productivity with that meeting, rather than just losing what happened in closed session. And that doesn't make sense to me. No productivity versus part of the meeting, you know, having been partly short. I don't know. There was a lot still that got done in that meeting because he was able to attend remotely. I think that, you know, things happen. If you're able to reconnect quickly, why would you? I mean, we're going on an hour and a half meeting right now, and say I was attending remotely, and at 6:03 I lost connection but was able to sign back in at 6:04. Isn't it more beneficial that I've been here for an hour and a half missing 1 minute rather than missing an entire meeting? That's silly. That's just, the concept of that is ridiculous in my head. So that's another point that I'll make as far as that goes. Do I believe that if you miss an agenda item while you are logged out, that you should vote on it? Absolutely not. You missed the conversation. You shouldn't be voting on anything that you don't understand or you missed a conversation. So if you lose connectivity for 5 minutes and the fourth agenda item totally went by in a 3-minute span and you didn't hear it and the vote's getting ready, just don't vote. I mean, use your common sense. Don't vote on it. You didn't hear the conversation. You didn't hear the issue. You shouldn't vote on something you don't understand, you don't know anything about. I feel when I attend remotely, I participate just as much as I would participate when I'm here in person. And I can say the same thing about others that participate. Mr. Rigel attends remotely frequently. He's an active participant in all meetings. I never just see him sitting there and not contributing, as well as other members. So for that reason, I won't support this policy. I'd like to see you bring back a policy that specifically looks at lost connections resulting in no quorum. And that's the end of it for me.
Alderman Wagner, then Alderman Ryo.
Thank you very much. Well, I've not been a fan of this thing since it came out, but there were a couple of reasons for it. Number one was, I wonder, when I read it, it was staff oriented as far as I was concerned. And something rang a bell in the back of my mind there that, well, the council doesn't report to the staff. And I went on my normal search of the statutes, and I found 6211 of the state statutes, which talks about the duties of the common council. And I found this more interesting. They put it a little more bluntly than any of us would. They said, under procedures, it says, if the council shall be the judge of the election and qualification of its members and may compel their attendance and may fine or expel for neglect of duty. So that first of all, you don't report to the city administrator and say, or the city administrator wouldn't have any power over the council at all, whether they attended or not. And I remember the first time this came up, I asked the question, well, wait a minute, who's penalizing here? What's the penalty if they miss more than X number of meetings? What it is? And there wasn't any. There wasn't any in the original thing. And this is probably why, because it's up to the council. So there were a couple of things I wanted to change in here, and I have an amendment ready that I can put in here, but I think we've got to sort some other things out first. One of the things that, the other thing about it is, and this is rather strange, in that same chapter, we worry about an alderman being sick or not being able to attend meetings, not just virtually or otherwise, right? But they have a provision for it. In sub D of that same section, they say that if any officer other than an alderperson is incapacitated or absent from any cause, the common council may appoint some person to discharge the officer's duties, excuse me, until the officer returns or until such disability is removed. Now get this. If an alderperson is temporarily incapacitated because of physical or mental disability, the common council may appoint a person to discharge the alderperson's duties until the disability is removed. So again, they're not messing around. They're saying that they want either attendance at a meeting or a good reason why. I think the parameters that I thought you guys were really steamed about were the having to ask permission after X number of weeks that you weren't going to be available, and you had to do something, you had to appear virtually for X number of weeks. For some reason or another, I thought of that in terms of nobody on the council should be concerned because it's going to be the older person itself, herself or himself, has to answer to the voters for their attendance or non-attendance on the thing. And even if they say, well, I'm going to be gone for a month, then, 4 weeks, but I'll attend virtually, the council can, if it wishes, exercise its ability to compel attendance on one way or the other. It doesn't say anything about whether that would be virtual or otherwise, which may be the flaw in it. But the point is that at that, they would set a limit and set it at the end of 4 weeks. If you had been granted a permission by the council to do that, then you could always extend it for whatever. And you're like, again, you're going to have to answer to your constituents, not us. Okay? That's what it would have to do. The changes I'd like to make is there in sub 4 sub B on that it says limits on utilization. No member shall utilize the participation methods referenced in this section 4. And if you had 3, I made it 4 or more consecutive weeks, unless the member demonstrates good cause as determined by, and I scratched out the mayor and city administrator and put in common council. And then, or if a state of emergency has been proclaimed by a federal, state, or local authority, and then insert past that, requests for utilization of electronic participation not involving an emergency shall be made directly to the common council at least 2 weeks prior to a meeting of the council. Okay, the reason for that is we've got to know if we're going to have quorums for those meetings. And the nightmare scenario is we get into the budget season and something comes up and at least 1 or maybe 2 members will have obligations outside of the council where they cannot attend. And we need to know that in advance. And, theoretically we could replace that alderman for that short period of time too, but I don't think we would do that. Anyway, and so I will be waiting until other people have had their say, and then at that point, I will propose this amendment to the plan. Otherwise, we still have to hash out the dropping of the call or whatever, the service. And I can't remember what the other one is. We'll have to look at that. Yeah, right, okay. But anyway, I want the discussion to continue because I'm just cleaning up one part of it, and there are other parts that need to be touched also. So I'll yield the floor.
Alderman Weigel?
Thank you. I'll keep this brief. For my first thought here before Mr. Wagner started speaking was just, I guess, not reminding, but just, I guess it was reminding the council that if we're going to send this back to staff to redo it, let's give them a little bit more direction here, just so if it does come back to us a second, or this will be a third time, they can at least address our concerns as opposed to, hey, we don't like it, figure it out. Let's just say, hey, axe this or axe that or fix that. Let's give them a little bit of direction. And then, I guess Mr. Wagner kind of beat me to the punch as far as, having a proposal there. My 2 cents on his proposal, I agree with most of it, except for the part where he replaces mayor, city administrator with the common council. My reason for it is less so who is the person making the decision, but more so we now need to have 9 bodies come to an agreement as far as someone potentially appearing remotely. So let's just say, to take this meeting, for example, it's not lost on me that I'm appearing remotely on this, but so if I were supposed to show up to this meeting remotely, we somehow need to get 9 council people to agree to allow me to appear remotely. And if this happens for more than 1 week in a row, we have to do that numerous times. It just seems a little too clumsy for me. So that's my only concern. And that's all I've got to say here. I'll let you guys continue the discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Werman, did you have something that you wanted to review?
Yeah, I was going to make an amendment too. We have to finish everyone speaking prior to the amendment. No? Okay. I see Jess shaking her head.
Do we know what the motion is yet before he's going to amend it?
Oh, solid point.
I don't know what the motion is yet before Mr. Werman's going to amend it.
The motion is to the second reading of ordinance number 1505. What is number M is the motion on the floor? No?
To what? To approve it?
Russ made the motion.
You're right.
Was there a different motion?
Yeah, that's the way it works, Brian.
I was just...
Say, I think if you motion, it's on the recommended approval, but yeah, again to clarify. So good call. Good call. So I was going to move to amend the motion to send the policy back to staff to come back to council with a revised policy focused on missing meetings, leaving meetings, and recommended action to be reviewed by the common council rather than staff.
And is there a second to that amendment? Second by Alderman Giles. Alderman Spiros, you have a comment?
Yes, I just need a clarification then. If we're going to be talking about attendance, does attendance include remote attendance, which is what we've always been calling it? I believe if you're here remote, you're still attending the meeting. I think we need to make a clarification on that because that's going to be a sticking point, clearly. Personally, I believe if you're here, you're here, whether it's remote. We've always called it remote attendance. So I don't know why we would change that verbiage now, unless we're just trying to change the verbiage to fit the narrative. So I would wonder if we could stress that. And I do think that, again, the basis of this policy should center around the things that Mr. Werman said, with clarification of what attendance is and possibly adding in some sort of a line item about making sure to notify staff in advance of any time that you'll be attending virtually when you know it, which I have done every single time that I've ever attended virtually.
Okay. Hap, and then we'll Alderman Stauber after Hap.
Was I first? I don't want to.
Nope. We'll let him go.
So I just want to clarify a couple things. First, one very good point is I think we have a problem in the sense that staff needs that direction. At the last meeting, there were a lot of different things said. And then it probably was a poor choice to move forward with the idea that some members were going to contact Steve and give some suggestions, because although I wasn't involved in that process, I saw the suggestions and they weren't consistent with one another. So now you have another issue, and that is staff's trying to figure out how to parse between one opinion that nobody should attend and another opinion that everybody should attend. And you've got that problem of trying to, come up with a solution that's going to then be passed. The one thing I want to say that with respect to the main point that I had said that brought this to a head in the first place was this dropping off the line. And so I wanted to clarify that the view of that in terms of being consistent with somebody joining back on. Initially, I had said once somebody drops off, I want it very clear that they're off. So we're not trying to connect somebody back or waiting to not take any additional action at the meeting unless it's clear that once you're off, and we can move forward without bringing that person back on. At your last meeting, then it was discussed, well, what if you only miss a couple minutes? If I got up and went to the bathroom or something, I could come back. So that's where then it got added back in that if somebody gets brought back on the line. I think those two things can be consistent with one another in this sense. If somebody drops off the line, we can clearly say that we're going to treat that as voluntary so we can move forward. We don't have to wait to connect somebody back. What the new provision that was brought in there was that somebody could be reconnected so that if they did get connected, they could continue on. But we've created in the record that once somebody's off, we'll treat them as off. If they get reconnected, well, fine, they're back in. But we don't have to wait around to try to connect somebody and it's clear. So again, you don't have to leave that in there, but that's why those two things, they appear inconsistent. But the point of that was to try to bring the two concepts together, that we know we can move forward if somebody drops off. But if somebody does get rejoined back in, it's not to prohibit them from being able to do it. I just want that record clear that once they're off, we don't have to wait around and try to connect somebody regardless of what the reason was, because it could be very frustrating for you folks. I think with respect, I don't remember how Alderman Stauber had his incident happen that brought this to a head, but it probably isn't anybody's fault. That's the thing. And so you're there, you're thinking you're going to participate. Maybe it's an important vote. And if to no fault of your own, you drop off, you got a real argument that you didn't let me participate in the meeting, so you should have shut the meeting down. And without having clarity with our rules, that's really where we're left.
Thank you, Hap. Alderman Stauber.
So is the amendment that permission be granted by the 10 members or the 9 members of the council?
It was that there is, if there's an incident, it's to be reviewed by the council, because currently the proposal is that if there are instances like that, it would be reviewed by the staff. And so echoing Ed's comments from earlier, my proposal would be that it would come to the common council to review. For example, if there's negligence, if people are dropping off of virtual meetings and we find it as a concern, it would be up to the council to review.
And as long as I have the floor. Did you have a question on that, or?
No.
So it got me thinking about a lot of things, and the proposed, and I was on vacation, by the way. I didn't really have to attend anyway. Thought I was doing everyone a favor. And here we are. I think the basic premise for me is that an elected official is there to represent the constituency, and that means, I guess, not so much up to interpretation, in my opinion. It's a basic expectation. You know, someone calls me and says, "Hey, I've got a crack that the city caused in my driveway apron. Come over and take a look." Something like that. And these are things that happen. And I was going to think, how do I state this? I wish COVID would have happened in 2013, because in 2014, I accepted a project assignment for my employment, and I was traveling to Tampa, Florida for a year and a half. And I was halfway through my term in February of 2014, voluntarily stepped down. Had we had virtual, maybe I would not have had to step down, but I just thought, hey, I can't attend, I can't represent my constituency, I might as well step down. And then if we totally open it up, at large comes to mind. You know, we represent a district. I'm in the 6th district. That's, southeast part of Marshfield. If we're going to allow total freedom, I guess, why wouldn't we solicit candidates from Las Vegas, New York City? if you own a house in Marshfield, you can be an alderman, right? If I'm going to move up north, but I have a house in Marshfield, does that mean I'm a vested person in Marshfield? Maybe I should still be on the council. So I think it's just the discussion is good, but my view is that we're making too much of it, and I think the expectation should be that when you're an elected official, you attend the meetings and in person. I think is the expectation. It's a privilege when you can do it remotely, and I think it works well. But I do agree that there should be some boundaries, some guidelines to this practice.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you. I know much of this has been said before. I will again repeat some of it, but one thing I'd like to mention is we had city governments before we had telephones. Now we use telephones. Should we go back to only allowing people to speak in person? We came up with cell phones. Cell phones were okay to speak with your constituents. Do we go back to phones that are only stuck on the wall? Technology changes. These positions have changed with time. The only important aspect of it, in my opinion, is that you have communications with your constituents if necessary. You have access to the documents and items that you're going to be working on. And you're even with what we use, the state allows phone calls. We have in video. It all boils down to the constituents are the ones that suffer by limiting this. And to this time, I still have not heard one advantage to doing it, but there are tons of disadvantages to limiting the access via video or conferencing. I would remind everybody that if you vote to limit this access, I hope you get phone calls from all over town, because you are limiting constituents in 1, 2, 3, or all of the districts. That is the only thing that vote does. I see no advantage to doing it whatsoever. I don't know. I just cannot wrap my head around any of the discussions that are going on. It just makes absolutely zero sense to me.
Alderman Wagner.
Thank you. I couldn't disagree with you more, Mr. O'Reilly. I think the assumption of the voter is that when they pull the lever for you, you're going to be there for them when you need it. They didn't hire you to go remote control. And it's, by the way, the whole thing, and this is something that astounds me every time we get into a discussion like this, because what I'm hearing from some of my worthy colleagues here is, I will do this and I will do that. And this whole thing isn't about us. It's about the constituents and what service we're providing for them. And if I'm going to be on a beach in Tahiti, I'm not going to be able to go out and look at that crack in the driveway that they look at. And by the way, they appreciate that. They appreciate that when you go out and physically inspect the problem that they're telling you about. You can't do that with a telephone, Mr. O'Reilly. You can go out there and show them your industry and your best effort to solve the problem in the flesh. And that's how it's done. That's what we're here for. So I will disagree with you and hope that we can still remain friends afterwards.
Alderman Tompkins.
Mr. Riley, did you have an amendment before because you pushed the amend button? So I just need to know if I need to clear that off or not.
Okay, Alderman Tompkins, then Alderman Weigel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, so this has been a hard topic. There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of points of view. You know, when I've been listening for the last 3 times, last time we had this discussion, a very, very strong point of view came by of, I can have personal freedom. Don't tell me what to do. but also we have the point of view of the other point of view of we want people to be present. So in any society throughout all of history, if you join a group, there will be a code of conduct, no matter where you live. Whether it's your family, your faith organization, your employer, your school, there's going to be rules. So to agree to join this group, we do sometimes have to give up personal freedom. So that argument to me is not a strong one for this policy. But we also have on the whole other spectrum, people who say, we want you here all the time. That too is very difficult, as we know, in our age where we have people who go through surgeries, we have unexpected emergencies in families, and we have people who travel for work. I feel like this policy, the reason why it's so hard is because it's trying to compromise those two extremes, and it's trying to say, can we come up with something that's workable? And no one will be happy. But that's what compromise is about. You won't be happy about all of it, but you might be happy with some of it. I think it's giving parameters. And I do agree with Mr. Stauberg, and I do agree with Mr. Wagner that part of this job is that we are present in Marshfield. That when I drive down a road and I see a pothole and it's driving me nuts that my car goes over it, that I can call the street department or I can use the great online thing and tell them there's a pothole there. That when someone calls me about their ditch and they're so annoyed that their ditch keeps on washing out, I can go to their property and understand what they're talking about so I can communicate that. So also, we're spending our money here when we live here. When if we are spending months and months away, we're not invested in this community. We're not going to events. We're not spending our money. We're not volunteering. So yes, there is value to being present in our community. We cannot downplay that. But there is also value to having a policy where members can have some remote access because we need everyone's voices. So what I think we should do is just say, this is a compromise. It's not gonna feel great, but let's move forward. And so I'm looking at this amendment and I'm wondering, since the amendment is on the floor, are you saying that if someone they have been gone 3 weeks, they are remote, that they would come to the council? Is it a majority vote of the council that says, hey, whatever's happening is valid, we totally understand, yes, do your 4th meeting remote? Is that a majority vote, or are you saying it's a complete 9-person vote? That's for Mr. Werman for his amendment.
I think we haven't gotten there yet. And if I may, do you still want the floor after this?
No, I'm good.
Okay, sure. I was next up. So I think we're mixing issues. And this is the reason I asked at the very beginning, what is the purpose of this? What are we trying to accomplish? And the goal, from what I understand, is we had a situation where somebody had to drop out or accidentally dropped out, and it caused our meeting to have to stop abruptly. And we had to talk about, we don't have anything in place for this. We are now mixing issues of, we had a situation, we need to accommodate the idea of somebody leaving a meeting, and what do we do now, versus are people living in Marshfield? Are they, living away from here, or spending 3 months away and attending meetings virtually? Those are two very different things. This policy, from what I understand, should be focused on attendance. So when I said that, my understanding would be referring back to the policy of people have attended virtually for 4 meetings. Then I would think that it would go back to the council to be a majority vote, which I would recommend staff look into in the policy, because I don't think we'd be able to decide that here, to say, is this person being negligent? They've attended remotely 4 meetings and they haven't said a word. Then I think that's something that would come to the council to say, hey, they're attending virtually, but they're not engaged at all. They don't seem to care. They're checked out. That's a very different issue than, hey, this person is, like somebody said, on a beach in Tahiti. That's very different. And I think we're kind of mixing those issues, and I think we should separate that and focus on, the reason I made the amendment was we have a policy here that we're looking at in terms of people virtually attending meetings. And if they're going to attend those meetings virtually, if they drop off, if they leave, and if they're going to continue to attend them virtually, how do we approach that? And so I do want to make sure that we stay focused on that issue. And if we need to come back and revisit the other issue of consistently being a virtual attendee and never being in person, I think that's a different topic. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity on the motion, but I don't think we can decide that tonight. I think that would have to come from staff recommendation in the policy.
Alderman Ragle, did you want to say something? I can't remember if you had your hand raised.
I did, thank you, and I think I got cut off at the knees here. Just for clarification, did Mr. Werman's amendment get a second to this point?
Yes. Alderman Giles seconded.
Okay.
Yes. And actually, you did not get cut off, Andrew. How it works is if somebody has an amendment, they have the right to speak in front of the next, because you were after Alderman Tompkins.
Oh, no, I didn't mean
actually, your knees are perfect.
I meant that. I meant Mr. Werman took the wind out of my sails. He beat me to the punch. No, so I guess I'll just, I didn't chime in for this. I'll let the vote go for the amendment first, but I guess once again, I'll just reemphasize my concern is just about the functionality of having this governing body approving or denying someone's remote attendance. It seems clunky to me, but I'll chime in later on once the amendment's cleared up. Thank you, guys.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you again. I don't even know where to go with this. I guess the question I have would be if 2 meetings, 3 meetings, 4 meetings, whatever could be deemed acceptable, if they're consecutive. What if somebody takes 10 weeks vacation, a week vacation 10 times a year? Is the intent here to determine how many days a year each person has to be in this town to represent their constituents? Because you're going to see a very large dynamic of different travel plans, different lifestyles. I do not believe that what Mr. Wagner said is necessarily true. I mean, would it be perfect to have everyone available and sitting at home for a phone call all the time, but they had to go get groceries and they couldn't make it over to the neighbor's house to see a crack? I mean, a lot of these things can be dealt with. There's other technology too. You can discuss, you can go to Google Earth, you can send pictures. I mean, there's so much technology that we're hampering ourselves. And no, I don't believe that a phone is necessarily the almighty way of doing things by any means. I was stressing the fact that technology changes, the way we communicate changes. Medical people meet with their patients this way. Attorneys hold depositions. I mean, this is acceptable all over in this country. And for some reason, we feel that we need to put a limit on remote attendance for a council position. I see no advantage to doing this. It is going to limit representation of the people. And if the people that vote for you are not upset with you not attending meetings, what the heck does the rest of this room have to say about it? They're the ones voting for you. I don't know. I'll yield back.
Alderman Spiros.
Yeah, I'm only gonna make one point, and that's about getting consent from 9 other members of the Common Council. You know, you can decide to do that, but I would hesitate doing that because it is clunky. I don't think everybody checks their email every day. Steve said earlier to start out this topic that he only got 2 responses and then had to go back out to the body to get them to respond, and then only 2 more people responded. So only 6 people responded, or 4 people out of 10 responded anyway. So I don't see that being a very good method of trying to get consent, because I don't think that you're going to get people to respond, or at least not in a timely manner. So I guess if you're going to look for 9 other people to consent, then maybe you have to put a time frame on that. You know, if you don't hear from them in 24 hours, it's presumed they consent, or 48 hours, or whatever you want to do. But it has to be within a reasonable amount of time, because I don't feel that you'll get the responses like you think you're going to, as you proved in introducing this topic and only getting 2 responses initially, having to go back out and only then getting 2 more. So I think it is funky also.
App and then Alderman Wagner.
Just to clarify that, the mechanism there that you're talking about, it couldn't be done without convening the body, because that would be a violation of open meeting. So you couldn't like say, hey, somebody's going to miss and this is their 4th time, so what does everybody think about that? You'd have to convene a meeting to be able to do that. So that's a reason why it's clunky. You guys, again, this is Alderman Wagner's reference to the statute. The body controls this. That's why the ordinance is in front of you, and you can do whatever you want with it. I think the difficulty here is getting that consensus and so that there is direction. But while you could have that, you would literally have to convene a meeting to then decide whether a member could attend remotely because they're on their 4th term or 4th time.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you again. The state, in its wisdom, has thought the concept of attendance is so great that they give the Common Council the power to compel attendance of an alderman if an alderman has been doing it, and it tells us they can fine them or suspend them, and they can do any of those things as dereliction of duty. They can do it as they want to. The importance, until I think until somebody in the state legislature puts a bill in and says, oh, by the way, attendance means virtual too. Until they do that, they're gonna hammer down on this idea that they are going to push for compelling actual physical attendance somewhere, somehow. That's how they're doing it. I'm getting lost in my notes here, so this is getting bad. But I will, if this does go back to committee, I will avail the notes and the research that I've done to Mr. Werman and his group, or whoever is working with him on this, or whoever will work with him on this. So hopefully they can condense this thing and get it in. I don't know. I think I see it getting emotional, and I don't see this from any personal angle whatsoever. I'm looking at this as to who's doing what and who has the authority to discipline the council if, in fact, they need discipline. Could be anybody. Could be the 10 of us. Could be somebody suggested to me today that it could be the council president. I don't know. But anyway, good luck in sorting this thing out.
Alderman Werman?
I just want to provide clarity because a couple people have mentioned that it's a clunky idea. First of all, I never said email or anything other than a meeting, so I don't know where that came from. But the thought process behind it was we currently have a policy proposed to us that says if you miss this many meetings, it's going to go to staff to determine. So I'm saying literally take that and say now it goes to council to determine next action. If we feel like that person is negligent for missing 4 meetings, then you need to discuss that as a body rather than putting it in the hands of the mayor or the city administrator, because that seemed to echo a lot of what people's concerns were last time. So just for a little clarity there, that was the comment. It wasn't necessarily that we're all going to email each other and determine if we need to take action, because I know that would be an open meetings violation. Yeah. So
Alderman Weigel?
Thank you. Okay, I came into this meeting telling myself I wasn't going to speak on this topic because I'm remote, and here I am chiming in for the 3rd time. I can't remember who mentioned this, but it seems like we are running the gamut here on different things. So before I do what I'm about to do here, I just want to say my suggestion would be the following here, because I think, once again, I've made a point of not expressing my opinion on this one or the other tonight. And I think every point that everyone has made, both for and against this, have valid points. Now, I think we need to go back to what Mr. Warman brought up about the fact of what's the impetus behind this. The impetus is making sure that we have set rules in place for when something doesn't go according to plan. So if I'm mid soapbox speech here and I cut out, well, you know what to do. You don't wait for me, you move on, or whatever's in the rule, which at this point we don't have. So I think as a body, we kind of agree to that extent. Now, as far as number of meetings missed in a row, as far as closed sessions or other things, I think that's very much up to debate and can be debated. So my suggestion would be, and obviously there isn't a motion right now for this suggestion, but I'm just putting it out there so that once we wrap up the amendment and everything else, there's at least an idea floating out there, whether I make the motion or not, neither here nor there. But my suggestion would be to send it back to staff and have them bring it back piecemeal. So bring it back as one part, saying, okay, here's the policy regarding disconnections, here's the policy regarding closed meetings. That way, instead of trying to handle this, what's frankly is kind of a large policy, but instead of trying to handle this all at once and pointing out different parts here, we can at least establish a base and then discuss, okay, how many meetings in a row? And we have a discussion only on that, and then we have a discussion only on closed session, so we can at least come to a conclusion instead of having one person disagree on line item A, someone else disagree on line item B, and we're never coming to a consensus here. So with that being said, I'd like to call the question to Mr. Warman's amendment here so we can vote on that.
Alderman Warman?
Can Andy amend the amendment? Isn't that in?
He just called the question.
He called the question.
all the
Your
discussion
amendment.
stopped.
On behalf of your
Yeah, he
amendment.
did not amend. He called the question. Motion by Alderman Weigel, second by Alderman Varsho to call the question. And the amendment to the, okay. Please vote.
Oh. We're voting on call and question.
Yes.
Correct. We're voting on the call to question.
There was no discussion on that, so.
Correct. So we can move forward. Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Reigel?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Can we go to page 2 now?
Yeah. So,
Just have to get back.
discussion. So discussion continues as so it
No,
wants to.
no, it passed. So we're,
Oh, it did?
yeah, so
Oh,
we need to
okay.
vote on that amendment.
Okay,
Now we need to vote on the amendment.
Correct.
I'm
that
sorry.
Alderman Werman put forth with a second by Alderman Giles.
Can we get a repeat on the amendment, please?
That is to amend the original motion to send this ordinance back to staff to address the ideas of what constitutes missing meetings, what happens when a member leaves a meeting, and if there is an incident, it should be reviewed by council and not staff.
Were those going to be brought back individually? Was that the concept on it, or was?
That direction was not given in the motion.
Seeing no other comments, please vote to amend.
Mr. Reigel?
No.
You vote? Okay.
That motion passes, excuse me. Alderman Weigel?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the current motion to send it back to staff to break this out into sizable pieces, specifically to address disconnections and then separately address closed meetings, and then separately as well number of meetings in a row, and then finally who the decision maker would be as far as the number of meetings permissible to appear remotely.
As a point of order, does someone have the right to make an amendment if they were defeated in the previous vote, rather?
He didn't make.
What?
Right, correct. It's only the amendment.
It wasn't on the
It
original.
wasn't on the
it's
original motion.
amendment.
Correct.
We have a motion by Alderman Weigel, second by Alderman Varsho and Alderman Spiros.
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember what I was going to ask. Oh, I was going to ask a question. Do we not have a policy that addresses attendance? that's connected to also pay as far as meeting? So we have an attendance policy already for council in place.
Yeah, and this, it was a few years ago, we did an amendment that said that if you miss 2 or more of your main meetings, whether that be a committee meeting like Board of Public Works or Finance, Budget and Personnel, or Council, you would be docked $100 for that month.
So you would consider that an attendance policy?
It's part of our attendance policy, I believe, yes.
So we have an attendance policy for council.
Wait a minute, or is it part of the finance section of the code? But it's in there that we've got that requirement that if you miss more than 2, you're going to be docked.
So that's an attendance policy?
2 or more.
I'm just clarifying.
Well, it may be a financial policy tied to attendance. I sound like I'm splitting hairs, but I'm not sure if it's in Chapter 3 or Chapter 4 of the code.
It addresses attendance.
But it does address, it addresses members' attendance.
Thank you.
If you were to miss 1 meeting of the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, 1 meeting of the Council next month, you would be docked $100 for missing 2 meetings.
Any other discussion? Is there an amendment on that motion by Alderman Weigel, second by Alderman Varsho? Please vote.
Read the amendment.
I just have it paraphrased here, which is essentially to bring it back in smaller chunks.
I just can't remember.
I'm sorry.
Yes, a lot going on.
That works for me. As long as they're ones that we can work with, but yeah.
Mr. Weigel?
Yes.
That motion passes. Amendment motion.
So now we have to go back to the original motion, which has been amended many times.
Which is by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Fire. Any other discussion in the original motion? Seeing none, please vote. See how fast we did that?
Is this the amended motion?
No, we already did all the amendments. Now we're going back to item M. Which is the original. Which is the original.
Original as
So now we are voting on, are we going to approve this or are we not going to approve this?
Approve it with the amendments.
We are approving the original motion as amended multiple times.
Holy smokes. Okay.
I'm sorry, but I'm really confused here. So we are voting on the amended motion that Mr. Weigel brought forward?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
You are not approving the ordinance right now. You are approving moving forward with all of the amendments that were made.
Putting in.
Correct. Mr. Weigel?
Yes.
Motion passes.
That's finally it.
Is that it?
I think it's finally it.
Yeah, he lied. No, I'm not going to get my.
Thank you.
I'm not going to get my grade. Okay, so we don't do anything with the original motion, correct?
It's over.
Depends on what you define as that.
We're done.
Okay.
We're done.
Item N, first reading of ordinance number 1508, weights and measures regulations, presented by Jordan Munger in 2 minutes, accounting manager.
2 minutes. Thank you. I hope this goes fast.
Weights and measures.
All right. The reason for this ordinance is basically, we talked about it earlier, trying to find ways to, I guess, balance our budget, make sure that we're controlling costs and passing fees on where they're supposed to be passed. In this case, there's a charge that the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection charges to the city for going out to gas stations, grocery stores, and other facilities to check their equipment to make sure that the consumers of that product are receiving exactly what is being weighed and measured and then sold to them. Okay. The state itself contracts out with all the different municipalities, allows that service to be given to the municipality through the business, and then the cities or municipalities pay that. Some municipalities choose to put that fee onto the actual users, i.e. the businesses that are generating those charges to the city. We have not. This was last brought up in 2008, whereby it was a decision at that point in time not to pass it on as a user charge. we are now bringing it forth to you through staff joint teamwork. Thank you very much, Jessica, and all others involved, Jennifer, Steve, and Pat, and as well as HAP for reviewing this ordinance to pass a user charge onto the businesses that are actually incurring these fees for us. So the thought process is the fee's not exorbitant. It's about $10.52 per device. The main, the main people or main organizations that would be hit with the larger side of the fees are roughly 20 organizations that are mostly gas stations, grocery stores, larger organizations that also see this, i.e. in other communities within inside Wisconsin. And it would leave probably about $750 for smaller businesses, about 40 of which that I can identify, that would have to buck up for the $750 outside of it. In total, we would be charged $8,250 from DATCAP for all of these weights and measures, and we would then, finance would then, through this ordinance, bill out those services back to the businesses. So I am ready and willing to entertain any questions. 2 minutes?
Very good, very good. Alderman Spiros?
Yeah, Jordan, I just want to thank you and all the people you listed. I did not know this existed, but it was common sense to me. So thank you for researching it along with the rest of the team that you mentioned and bringing it forward to us. Thank you.
Alderman Tompkins?
You know what? I'm echoing exactly what you said. We have asked to find ways to decrease our budget for next year, and already twice in this meeting, we've had different departments stand up and say, we're trying our best and here's a proposal. So thank you for doing that, listening to the council and just partnering with us. And also thank you for that graph you gave us, to show that a small business in town is going to have $10 extra, whereas a larger business is going to have 300. That is so helpful for us. So thank you for doing that work. That's it.
I just want to echo what Jordan said. It was a great team effort, but you did a wonderful job, Jordan, throughout this entire process of doing the research you've done, putting this together. And I think this is the truest case of a user fee. I mean, if the state could bill these people directly, we wouldn't even be seeing it. They can't. We're the ones who pay. This honestly is people paying for what their service that they're getting from the state of Wisconsin.
Thank you, Jordan, and we will bring it to the next meeting for a final reading. And thanks again for all your hard work.
Thank you as well.
And that was 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Item O, request to approve budget resolution number O-2-2024, increasing the 2024 Recreation Department 2nd Street Community Center repairs and maintenance supplies account by $4,524.90 presented by Justin Casperson, Parks and Recreation Director.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. While reviewing their accounts, the Finance Department discovered an old donation from 2014 in an amount of $4,024.90 called Andrew Felker Trust Donation that was intended for Parks and Recreation. There has been a complete turnover in the Finance Department and almost a complete turnover in our department. No one is around that really can identify why that donation was given or what intended purpose it was for. So we want to close that donation out. So we're proposing just to use the monies for improvements at the community center. There's still a number of things we can do there to make improvements that are pretty minor, but can go a long way with the $4,000. This was brought in front of the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee last week, and it was approved, but the budget resolution does need to come before this body for final approval, which we're doing tonight. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the budget resolution 02-24 to increase the expenditures for 2nd Street Community Center just for this year, not for next year.
We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Tompkins. Alderman Stelber?
2 questions. There are descendants of Andy Felker that are still around. Did we check with them?
I believe we did, right? I'm not aware of any Andrew Felker or the trust of the family. I have no recollection of the family at all. At least I personally don't.
They're still around. And that brings up and it's not a big dollar amount, but who knows? You might be rocking someone's boat by, arbitrarily taking the funds that they had dedicated for one thing and putting it in some other place. And then the other question is, have we changed the policy at all to find secondary descendants or something like that. In other words, if someone creates a fund, is it a requirement then that we have a lineage to follow in case there are questions like this that come up?
Most of the fundraising and donations go through the community foundation at this point, and those funds are dedicated to whatever project that might be. So let's say it's the pool project. If the donor gives to the pool project, it has to go towards that project. Like it can't go towards the zoo or a baseball field or something of that sort. So they have to go towards that project by, I guess, donation laws or federal tax laws. As for this fund, I'm Jennifer, I don't think you're not aware of the purpose. It was before my time, before all of our time. So we don't have any like lineage of why or what was going on at that point.
It just, it sends a message to other people that may be considering making a donation. I'll leave it at that.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Riegel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item P, request to refer vacation of Bradford Court right-of-way for preliminary resolution number 2024-03 to the Plan Commission review and recommendation presented by Tom Turchi, Director of Public Works.
All right, the developers of Roxy Properties LLC have requested that the city vacate a portion of Bradford Court as shown on the attached map. Upon vacation of the portion of Bradford Court, the developer intends to provide a new certified survey map in anticipation of a new housing development. The street vacation process includes a draft resolution presented to the Common Council, which is then referred to the Plan Commission for a recommendation. Once the Plan Commission makes a recommendation, the public hearing is held by the Council and a final action is taken on the resolution. A draft copy of Resolution 2024-03 is attached. The Board of Public Works has taken action and recommended that the vacation process move forward. Therefore, I recommend that Resolution 2024-03 be referred to the Plan Commission for a recommendation.
We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Fire, second by Alderman Giles. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Riegel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item Q, request to refer vacation of Veterans Parkway right-of-way for preliminary resolution number 2024-04 to the Plan Commission for review and recommendation presented by Tom Turchi, Director of Public Works.
The developers of Marwood Real Estate 2 LLC have requested the city vacation a portion of Veterans Parkway Frontage Road and Lincoln Avenue as shown on the attached map. Upon vacation of this portion of Veterans Parkway Frontage Road, the developer intends to utilize the extra space for future development. The street vacation process includes a draft resolution presented to the Common Council, which is referred to the Plan Commission for recommendation. Once the Plan Commission has made a recommendation, a public hearing is held, and the Council will take final action on this resolution. A draft copy of the Resolution 2024-04 is attached. The Board of Public Works has taken action and recommended that the vacation process move forward. I recommend that Resolution 2024-04 be referred to the Plan Commission for a recommendation.
We have a motion by Alderman Giles, second by Alderman Fire. Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you. So just please clarify for me, on this map, there's a triangle. Does that triangle, is that city property? Or is that their property?
That is city property. Back in about 98 or 99, we realigned the intersection of McMillan and Lincoln Avenue to get rid of a offset T intersection for safety reasons. And we purchased that property with that project back at that time. Then Veterans Parkway was reconstructed at a later date, and I think around 2004 or 2005. And they realigned the frontage roads, which then they moved the road again at that time. So this was a piece that's kind of left over from both of those purchases.
So when they ask us to vacate, are they asking us to give them the land or are they purchasing the land?
They are actually, anytime we vacate, it goes back to the original owner or the person that the land was purchased from. In this instance, with this resolution, we are vacating the area, but we are retaining all rights for existing and future easements because we do have utilities that are still in that location. What it does is it helps them change their setbacks. They can actually put buildings a little bit closer to the road rights of way and allows a little bit more space for development.
And is that normal that if we vacate land that it's not bought by the people?
That is normal. That's what's been done in my career here.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Request to approve task order 24-02 with Strand Associates to help the city apply for a stormwater construction grant for the Brain Park new wet detention basin project, presented by Tom Turkey, Director of Public Works.
I do first want to start by apologizing. This should have been on the Board of Public Works agenda at the last meeting, and I missed it. So, but it's a time-sensitive type of a project, so I wanted to bring it forward. The City of Marshfield is operating under an MS4 permit, which is for stormwater quality. The permit requires the city to meet phosphorus reduction limits set forth by our current citywide storm sewer management plan, or TMDL, which we call the total maximum daily load of phosphorus. The permit requires the city to reduce its phosphorus release by 10% over the next 5 years. One of the most effective ways to do this is by construction of a stormwater basins within the municipal limits. The capital improvement program has 2 projects enumerated in meeting the city's TMDL reduction goals. The Wisconsin DNR offers construction grants on a biannual basis with applications to close on April 15th of this year. The engineering division has been short in engineers since April of 2023. Therefore, I have requested assistance from Strand and Associates, their stormwater group, who actually helped us create the stormwater plan, to assist us in completing a grant application on behalf of the city. Strand and Associates has offered to complete this application for a stormwater construction grant on behalf of the city for $9,800. If the grant is awarded, the city would be reimbursed 50% of the cost for construction of a stormwater basin. In the CIP, there are 2 basins that are enumerated. One is in Brain Park, which is a new wet detention basin, and the second was Mill Creek Business Park, which is a dry basin looking to be converted to a wet basin. I recommend approval of task order 2402 with Strand Associates Stormwater Group to assist the city in applying for a stormwater construction grant specifically for the Brain Park new wet detention basin project.
We have a motion by Alderman Spear, second by Alderman Giles. Alderman Tompkins.
Thank you. Again, thank you for applying for grants. I know that Public Works, you guys apply for so many grants, so kudos. In the CIP, do we have the full cost of those 2 ponds when we put it in the CIP?
Initially, when we put these in the CIP in the previous process, we didn't actually have the actual estimates done at that time. We had 2 projects where we basically put just placeholders at 500,000. This project is as close to that placeholder. The other one was a higher number, so we felt that this would be a better project to apply for to start with.
So if we get this grant, it's almost like we are taking 50% of the project cost out of the CIP. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's wonderful.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Request for council input related to development of the 2025-2029 capital improvement project, presented by Tom Turkey, Director of Public Works.
All right, a capital improvement program, or the CIP, is a community planning and fiscal management tool to use to coordinate the location, timing, and financing of capital improvements over a multi-year period, and the city uses 5 years for that. Capital improvements refer to major and non-recurring expenditures such as land, buildings, public infrastructure, and equipment. The CIP includes description and proposed capital improvement projects ranked by priority and by a year-to-year schedule, and where the funding for these projects would come from. An estimated project cost and financing sources if grants or other items are used for financing these. Plan implementation. The CIP is a powerful tool for implementing a community's comprehensive plan, strategic plan, and other planning documents. Capital investments such as utility extensions, highway improvements, residential development, and major building improvements can be put into this plan. The city sets a threshold for projects in the CIP of $10,000 or greater. Typical steps for the CIP are project submission. So the departments basically submit the list of their capital improvement projects in order of priority, justifying including project cost, ongoing operation, maintenance cost, and future recommended funding sources. We use a evaluations and selection process. The CIP team reviews and prioritizes projects based on a specific set of criteria. And we have a project matrix, which basically the first one is health, safety, and welfare. And we have basically in these categories, we have high, medium, and low. So each gets a priority of 1, 2, or 3. The second criteria would be maintenance and replacement of existing infrastructure. Third is expansion of an existing program. And fourth is if it's a new program. Following that, we look at the financial analysis or financial data, including historic and projected local government revenues, expenditures, and debt service we use to assess the community's ability to pay for the proposed projects and to select appropriate financing tools. Plan preparation, the draft of the CIP includes a list of recommended projects by the funding year, projects scheduling and details, financing sources, detailed maps and photos and graphs. Then we look at the review and adoption of the CIP. And that's basically after the public has had a chance to take and review it and the governing body adopts and reviews it and is part of the capital improvement budget. This year's scheduled CIPs is as follows. Tonight we're talking about the overview of the capital improvement process. A few weeks ago, the CIP process was given to department heads at a kickoff meeting. We were requesting that all projects be entered into the planet or submitted to myself by March 15th of this year. And then any supplemental information to be submitted by March 22nd. Then staff meets to start prioritizing the CIP and balance the projects to meet the requirements of the CIP process. We're looking at that being done in April. In May, staff presents the document to the Common Council at work sessions, and we start discussing any types of changes that are being proposed by the Common Council. On June 11th, or June, the Common Council then would take a look at adopting the capital improvement program. In closing, the current CIP has an annual borrowing limit of about $4.5 million per year for each of the 5 years. And I emailed a link to assist everyone with last year's CIP process. Staff is requesting any requests as your desires to advance or delay projects as we are working forward to completing and getting the next CIP process done and submitted.
And that was information for the council input on CIP process. Alderman Tompkins?
So are you asking us here now to give input, or are you asking us at a later date?
You can give input at any time as we get this process moving towards being submitted to the council for its final approval. So I know you're getting a lot of information tonight. You know, I sent out the link for the existing program, but like, let's use, for example, a few years back, we advanced 17th Street ahead and got that project built. So we want to know those types of projects. Each time that something like that happens, we have to move something back. So it's a balancing act to make it all work within the program.
I would just say personally, so this is not the council speaking as a body, I would like to see there be a plan in the next 5 years for how we are what we're doing with the police station. So that's going to have to come out of the CIP, and it might mean that other things get cut. So that I would like to see there to be a plan for that. whether it be year one, we do this, then they move in, then year two, we do this, or we do it all at once. But before we approve a CIP, I think we have to look long and hard at the police station. So that's one. Is there anything in our CIP, maybe this is not a CIP thing, maybe this is a general budget, that has room for maintenance for buildings? Like if City Hall has a door or a leaking roof, do we have anywhere where there is room to actually fix the buildings we own? So that, I don't know where that comes out of.
Okay, so if we have, as you recall, last year I asked to replace one of the boilers in City Hall, and that was a CIP project that was slated for the City Hall, and that came in about 50% less than what we estimated it at. The projects that are enumerated like that, like if we needed a new roof, Jeff is inspecting the roof on a yearly basis. He's walking up there, he's looking at it, seeing if it needs any repairs, what he thinks the lifespan is left. At some point, we will probably bring back a project that says, okay, now the roof is getting close to its lifespan. We need to put this in the capital improvement program. If we're looking to repair a door, that would just more or less come out of the general budget for City Hall purposes. We would fix that door, or like as you notice, some of the paint was peeling next to the windows. We're trying to get some of that taken care of. What we're having is, since we moved into this building, we've had an issue with water coming in those two corners, and we just can't figure out where it's coming from. We can't see where it's coming from, but there's no holes in the roof. So we're not sure where it's migrating to make those spots weak. So yeah, we do have some maintenance dollars. With the tighter budgets that we have, it does make it more difficult to do some of those little repairs.
Yeah. And then if I could just say one more big picture item, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but just so people realize, because we have caps on our tax levy on what we can do for property taxes, and that comes from the state, because they've capped us on that, what they've said is, well, any other things that you need done, you can just borrow the money, and then the taxpayer can not only pay back that loan, they can also pay the interest on that loan. So basically, is that correct? Like we do a debt service?
No, you're basically correct. The state is encouraging cities and villages to borrow money, which I don't know if that was really their intent, but that's the way it comes off by the way levy limits are set up.
Right. And so the taxpayer ends up paying more money because they're paying interest. And the only group that benefits from the way it's set up are the lenders who already have enough money. So I'm sorry that we have to do it this way, and it is painful that we are putting more money onto the tax bill.
Alderman Stauber?
Thanks, Tom. Sometimes strategy and strategic plans are buzzwords. And I don't know how often we refer to our strategic plan. I know I haven't looked at it since I've been back on the council, same with comprehensive plan. And I just checked the CIP for 2024 and 2028 and did a search on a few keywords like strategy, strategic plan, don't exist. And I searched by plan, and I saw a plan come up for Parks and Rec. They've got a master plan, which is admirable. So my challenge to the CIP process would be, during the justification of any project, check the box how it's supported by how it supports the strategic plan, or how it supports the comprehensive plan.
Can I comment on that real briefly? Yeah, the city adopted a strategic plan back in late 2018. It was a 3-year plan from 2019 through 2021. And then we did a new one from 2022 through 2024. The first one, I think we had some success in getting items off the list. I really do. Things that were identified as goals and objectives. The second one from 2022 through 2024, which we're still in the middle of, we're in year 3. I think we've struggled, I'll be honest. And a lot of that has come from staff turnover, from key positions, people who would have been responsible for some of these goals and objectives. We've been having trouble. I mean, earlier in the 3-year period, we had trouble filling positions. We still do in development services. And but I agree with you. When we re-up the plan now for 1/1/25 through the end of 27, I agree. I think it needs to have a lot of input from council staff working together, and then be monitored and tracked more closely than it has been.
Alderman Giles, is that okay? Thank you. Alderman Giles?
Thank you. So when I first stood in the chambers last January, one of the things I said I hoped to accomplish was bringing more families into Marshfield. And I think Parks and Rec and activities is a huge factor in that. And I think our zoo is actually a big component of that. Now, I know that in order to expand the zoo, you need a certain amount of employees. And I believe we just actually had an employee at the zoo leave or give us notice to leave. But I would really like to talk about the CIP, maybe looking into bringing some more employees in and seeing what we can do for expanding the zoo, because I think that is we no longer have a certain employer who brings in families. So I think we have to look for outside sources like Park and Rec and activities.
Go ahead, Tom.
All right, just to hit the police department building, the Buffalo building, which we just took ownership, we are going to be having some serious discussions, I think, in the very near future, because we do need to have some direction as it relates to the CIP. So you'll be seeing more on that.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Yeah, we're definitely, from late winter into spring, you're going to have a serious conversation between the staff and the council on, is it feasible? Is it something you want to pursue? Not that the construction would happen in 2024, but is this something where you really want to see the police relocation happen, and what's it going to take to get there? Otherwise, if not, we should start talking after that about other options for that building. We didn't acquire it just to own it. We should look at other city facility possibilities, or even selling it to private enterprise. So look for that to be coming, real soon.
Any other discussion? Thank you, Tom. Item T, response to request from Councilmember Tompkins, review of city's bicycle ordinance presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Yeah, this is something that she brought up back in, I think, the early fall last year, and that tells you we're running behind a little bit. I'm running behind and getting to some of these, for which I apologize. She was asking, for a review of the city's bicycle policy. There's really two parts to this. The first one is just simply the ordinance that I put in the packet for you. It's ordinance number 8, or section 8-111 of the city code regarding regulation of bicycles. It's only a page and a half. It talks about, if you looked at it, registration and speed, rules of the road, hours of operation, operating on sidewalks, those kind of things. Kind of the basics. I ran that ordinance past the city attorney, the police chief, and others, trying to see if there were any suggestions, any concerns, any questions about the ordinance that we ought to look at possibly amending it. I really didn't get anything back. I didn't get anything that suggested that the current code is off track in some way and needs to be amended or overhauled. The second part, though, maybe what you're actually after in your request, is that we did adopt, and I'm going to hold it up for a second. Well, I say adopt. We have the 2021 City of Marshfield Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. And a great effort it was. Bryce Hembrook, our former city planner, did a wonderful job. I assume he worked with Justin's department. Josh Miller was also here at the time to be part of that. And it's nearly 100 pages. And starting on page 58 is a series of recommendations regarding bicycles. And there are things in there that talk about, let me get to my notes here a second. Places to park bikes, expanding and connecting bike trails, increasing connectivity for bicyclists across the community, possibly prohibiting bicycles in the downtown area, and other ideas. As far as I know, these were never formally acted upon unless I missed it. So perhaps what you're driving at are those types of things rather than the nuts and bolts of the city code itself. If that's the case, maybe it should be revisited again by Parks, Recreation, and Forestry or another city committee, and looked at whether or not some of those ideas that perhaps were not considered or adopted could be revisited. Again, I don't know exactly where you wanted to take it, but I'm thinking that might have been the avenue you met more than the actual Marshfield City Code.
Alderman Tompkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Steve, that's a great suggestion for that plan. That's actually, I was thinking of the ordinance, but that's a great suggestion to have Parks and Rec look at that again and just see if it's up to date. I did call the police as well to say, in this ordinance, what's a non-negotiable? What do you want to see in here? Because as an avid biker who bikes all around the city, the ordinance is a bit restrictive. And I feel like it needs to be a little more vague. I know Hap's looking at me. So I'll just say some of the things, and then I would propose that this ordinance be looked at by staff, cleaned up a bit, looked at by HAP, and then brought back to the council. The non-negotiables that the police wanted to know is that please register your bikes, because they get piles of abandoned bikes every year that they have to store and then they put in police auction. They don't charge for registration, but they want to get bikes back to their owner. Good thing to know. So there you go, register your bikes. The things I would like potentially to be a little more general so that we don't necessarily have people getting tickets for things like this would be that in this ordinance it says that you must have a hand on the handlebar and need to go up because your back hurts, and you go no-handed, and then you can go down for steering. So those are just like specific things that potentially we could just say, could you, you must bike in a safe manner. So that, and then there's another one where it says that you must signal for all turns and stops, which requires, I don't know how many people know what this and this mean. That was from elementary school. I would confuse drivers if I did that for my signaling. They might run into me trying to figure out what I'm doing. Like things like that should be taken out, in my opinion. And then we could just maybe have a more general bike in a safe manner. But I would just recommend that we send that to staff. It gets cleaned up a bit, but still legal. And the police, when I did talk to them, they said that those two things wouldn't be an issue because basically they stop people when they're biking in a manner that's unsafe.
Okay, will do.
That was information only, and thank you. Thank you for bringing that forth, Alderman Tompkins. Item U, response to request from Councilmember Spiros, annexation process and approaches, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, and this one goes back a ways too, so I apologize, Rebecca, for this. But the question had been raised about annexation policies and the city, what we do, and I think it's good to just review how annexations come about real briefly. The main way that they come about is request by the property owners who want to come into the city, whether they want to see their property, sold and developed for residential purposes or whatever, whether they want to just get sewer and water for their own use because their wells or private septic systems are not working well. Typically, they come to us. It's called direct annexation, and if they, if they're abutting the city, and so it's contiguous, and they're representing all the people who want to be part of it are represented in the petition. It's really usually a no-brainer for the most part, in most cases. It still has to go through the proper process, and the state of Wisconsin reviews it too. A little bit less clear if not all the people who would be brought into the city are on board with the petition. There's a reference in 3A to direct annexation by 1/2 approval. So in other words, owners of 1/2 of the property are supportive. That has some other hoops to go through. But typically, this is how annexations happen in most communities, and Marshfield's one of them. It's usually not us looking for properties to bring into the city, as people coming to us. The other possibility, and I put it in there in the what I handed out, I think, in advance in the packet, 66.0219, and that's annexation by referendum initiated by the city or village. And I do know, because I worked in the city of Ripon for 13 years as administrator, that there are communities in the eastern part of Wisconsin that are a little bit more active in terms of trying to bring land into their communities for various purposes, and they actually go out and maybe solicit property owners, trying to see if they'd be interested in coming on board, and maybe just taking the charge right from the get-go themselves to try and make it happen. There are more hoops to that if the city or village is leading the charge, and there's different avenues for appeal, which you see in that code. I'm not going to read it because, in fact, that is not the norm, and it can be challenged by people who own property, as you could expect, within the land requested for annexation by the city. So I think for the most part, as a city, the city of Marshfield is probably in central Wisconsin, where we sit here, way more times than not going to be looking for people who want to come to us. I realize that there's concerns about how do we grow if we don't have more land available for subdivisions, for industrial growth, abutting the industrial park or whatever. But it would be new territory for us to try and proactively bring land into the community. Not impossible, but it's been long-standing past practice that when people ask us what their development possibilities are, we work with them, we encourage them where possible to maybe to do that and bring more more growth into our community, but we leave it at that. So I would take any questions.
Any comments, questions? Thank you, Alderman Spears, for bringing that forth, and thank you, Steve, for the information.
Thank you.
Item B, request to approve appointment of Chris Mike Mikulski, 1507 West 7th Street, to the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Committee to complete an unexpired term ending in April 2025, presented by myself as mayor. We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Wagner. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
Thank you. And Chris, congratulations. You are part of the Park, Recreation, and Forestry Committee. Item W, you should have in your packet, this is the first reading of appointment of Elizabeth Lemoyne, 806 West 5th Street, to the Committee on Aging to complete the vacant term ending in April 2026, presented by myself. No action taken at this time. The vote will come in 2 weeks on February 27th. Any questions? Otherwise, move on to item X. Again, you should have this in your packet. This is the first reading of appointment Becky Hubner-Lew, 1313 East 26th Street, to the Committee on Aging to complete the vacant term ending in April of 2025, presented by myself as mayor. Alderman Fire.
As chairman of this committee, we're a very active committee, and a lot of times we're ending up, we don't have a quorum, so we can't get anything done. One of our major projects is we do a health fair in October, and here it is already February, and we're trying to plan this. And when we have a meeting, we don't have a quorum, we can't do anything. So I'm surprised, and I'm really happy to see two members that want to come and serve on this committee. I've served with Becky before. The only reason she didn't stay on is because she worked for the health system and she didn't have the time to attend the meeting. So we do need these two appointments to get this committee on the board, because we do a lot of things between county rides for share and a lot of things. So I'm happy to see, we've been without people for quite a while, so we do need this.
Yes, and I agree. I'm really glad they both stepped up. Alderman Varsho?
I think Mr. Fire answered my question. You do have availability for both of them on the board,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Thank
that's
you.
why they're both brought forward, yes. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, please remember February 27th. Thank you very much. Item Y, suggested items for future agendas. Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have one item that we had a lot of discussion last year about the fairgrounds, and there was a joint meeting held to basically get the Fair Commission and the Fair Board together. At that meeting, there was I'll call it a handshake deal, that there was going to be meetings quarterly to make sure that we get a prioritized list of anything that needs to be maintained and so on and so forth. So I was looking at the calendar. It looks like that meeting took place on August 8th of last year, and we'd be looking at the second quarter of that coming up in March. So I would request that we get some sort of a presentation from those people at what they put together, so that we know we don't run into the same issues in the future.
Alderman Spiros?
Yes, I would like to, I just have a couple of questions. I attended a League of Municipalities meeting, and they talked about how many grants were available, and certainly we've been applying for some grants, but we also pay a lot of money out to companies to apply those grants for us. So I'm wondering if it'd be possible to figure out how much we've paid to other companies in the past year to fill out grant applications for us. Additionally, how much money we received in grants, and what it would look like to possibly hire a part-time permanent grant writer for the city of Marshfield, so that we could actually explore a lot more open grants than what we currently do.
Thank you. Any other? Alderman Stauber?
Trying to think back, Steve, when we were doing the interviews for the Assistant City Administrator, Community Development Director, I think the person who was hired had experience with grant writing. I can't remember for sure, but I
see Sarah nodding. Yeah, I don't know to what degree, but I think that Carrie does have a background in that. That may be helpful. If nothing else, I mean, in terms of helping us figure out where to go next, along the lines of part-time or whatever else. But yeah, that would be helpful. And I think she will be able to help us in that. Good point.
Anything else? Yes.
I would just note the two things I mentioned earlier that I'll come back to you about the bullet points items under the consent agenda with a report on the criteria that we've been using and why. And then also the two items that I noted earlier regarding procurement policy and overtime tracking that are left over from previous requests.
Seeing no others, we will adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin Statute Chapter 19.851G, conferring with legal counsel for the government body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, claims for recovery of unlawful taxes. Do we have a motion on the floor to adjourn to closed session? I do not see a motion. I'm sorry, I do not see, all I see is just voting. Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Weigel, second by Alderman Spiros. Okay, please vote to go into closed session.
Mr. Weigel?
Yes.
We are in closed session. 5 minute